Life's too short for long recipes. Try Every Plate's deliciously simple meal kits instead. With 4 easy steps, dinner's ready in as little as 15 minutes. Every Plate. Get stuck in.
Need a fast cash loan without all the hassle? If you're an Australian resident,
Hey Diane, good to see you.
employed,
G'day Andrew, good to see you, mate.
Something unsettling is unfolding in the U.S. right now. Severe snowstorms and frozen lakes are gripping the Northeast. Floodwaters have surged through parts of the Grand Canyon. In Louisiana, reports of frogs falling from the sky have left many stunned. And across different states, mysterious lights have been spotted in the night sky, raising more questions than answers. What makes this moment truly frightening is not any one event on its own, but the convergence of so many unusual signs happening together. People are not just witnessing disasters, they are questioning what they can still rely on, as if the land itself is sending a warning and human certainty is beginning to crack. Before we move any further, if you sense that what is unfolding here cannot be understood in isolation,
Frogs, look at that.
if you feel there may be a deeper connection between what is shaking the land and what is shifting beneath our world, join us in reflection and leave your prey in the comment below. In the United States,
Yeah, I'm good, buddy.
specifically
Always
across
good.
the Northeast,
How about
a
you?
severe snowstorm has just swept through the region, leaving behind more than frozen roads and closed airports. What unfolded was not simply another winter weather event, but a sudden disruption that caught millions off guard. Roads became sheets of ice, transportation stalled, and daily life slowed to a standstill within hours. America did not collapse in one dramatic moment. It quietly shifted, as systems people rely on
We have a state under flood. A lot of floods in one of our states.
every day failed faster than expected. More alarming were the frozen lakes scattered across the region. Surfaces that
Cool,
appeared solid
Andrew. Good
only
on you,
days
mate.
before suddenly gave way without warning. Vehicles were swallowed by ice. People plunged into freezing water with no time to react. In several cases, survival depended not on preparation or strength, but on pure chance. The danger was not visible. It hid beneath what looked stable and familiar, turning ordinary decisions into life-threatening moments. In moments like this, human control feels fragile. Crews could not respond fast enough, not because of a lack of effort, but because nature moved faster than any system designed to manage it. Emergency vehicles slowed, railways froze, airports shut down, and even experienced residents admitted they were stunned. This was not fear in the usual sense, it was the realization that what once felt predictable no longer follows familiar patterns. The Bible speaks of moments like these, when nature itself enforces stillness.
Andrew, we're deep into summer and we've only had 2 really hot days.
In Job 37-10, scripture says, "By the breath of God, ice is given, and the broad waters are frozen fast." Ice is not described as chaos, but as a force that halts movement and interrupts human plans. And in Psalm 147-17, it is written, "He hurls down his crystals of ice like crumbs. Who can stand before his cold?" The message is clear. There are times when human strength reaches its limit, and control is revealed to be conditional. As these signs appear together, not in isolation, the question is not only what is happening, but how we are responding. If this moment stirs something in your heart, take a pause with us. Share a short prayer in the comments, asking for wisdom, protection, and understanding not just for those affected, but for all of us watching these signs unfold.
Wow, look at that.
At the Grand Canyon in Arizona, sudden flooding struck with little warning, transforming one of the most stable and iconic landscapes in the country within a matter of hours.
No
Violent
way.
floodwaters rushed through narrow canyons, tearing into ancient rock and triggering landslides that exposed layers of earth never meant to be seen. What had stood unchanged for millions of years was altered almost overnight. The consequences reached beyond damaged terrain. Walls of red sediment moved like liquid fire.
Wow.
carrying debris through passages shaped over geological time. Sections of rock collapsed, revealing fossilized footprints dating back hundreds of millions of years, along with evidence of massive creatures that disappeared suddenly in the distant past. Beneath the shifting ground, reports also surfaced of sealed underground chambers, areas restricted from public access, now drawing renewed attention as the land itself was forced open. In moments like this, human presence feels small. Scientists, rangers, and emergency crews could only observe as water moved faster than any attempt to control it. The Grand Canyon has always been seen as permanent, something beyond human influence. Yet even this ancient landscape proved fragile when pressure reached its limit. What unsettled many was not just the flooding, but how quickly
Abraham Lincoln talked about the giants in Niagara Falls. So it's common knowledge back in his day that there was giants. And he didn't say skeletons, he said giants.
stability gave way, leaving no time to prepare or respond. Scripture speaks of a time when water did not rise slowly, but burst forth from hidden depths. In Genesis 7:11, it is written, "All the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened." The Bible reminds us that floods are not always gradual disasters. Sometimes they arrive suddenly, reshaping the world in ways no one expects. And in Job 38-16, God asks, "Have you entered the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep?"
Man,
A question that echoes whenever what lies beneath the earth
imagine being stuck in them cars that went over the road like that.
is suddenly revealed. This moment also revives deeper concerns surrounding the Grand Canyon. Uranium deposits lie beneath the region, with several mines operating nearby, including the Canyon Mine at Pinyon Plain. For Native American communities and environmental groups, the fear has long been that underground water vital for drinking, farming, and cultural life could be contaminated when unseen systems are pushed too far. Flooding does not create these pressures, it exposes them.
Frogs, did you see that, guys? I've never seen it. Why not they call a swarm of frogs? Because frogs don't hang together, so it's not like they have their own call, like a bunch of crows is known as a murder of crows. I wonder if the toads have got something like that.
In Louisiana, something deeply unsettling occurred when thousands of frogs suddenly fell from a clear sky. Dash cameras and eyewitness videos captured the moment, showing roads, yards, and vehicles covered in frogs, even though there were no storms, no tornado warnings, and no unusual weather patterns reported that day.
Wow, that's certainly
The sky
weird.
appeared calm, yet what fell from it was anything but ordinary. The impact was immediate and disturbing. Traffic slowed as drivers swerved to avoid the animals. Neighborhoods were left in confusion, not knowing how to explain what they had just witnessed. Unlike typical weather-related events, this phenomenon offered no visible buildup, no sound of thunder, and no warning. It was the absence of explanation that unsettled people most, turning an everyday environment into something unfamiliar and uneasy. In moments like this, human understanding feels limited. Meteorologists confirmed that the usual causes linked to such events were not present, leaving science without a clear answer. When nature behaves outside expected patterns, people are reminded how little control they truly have. There are times when observation replaces explanation, and certainty gives way to silence. For many, the event echoed a powerful biblical image. In Exodus 8-2, Scripture records a warning. "If you refuse to let them go, I will plague your whole country with frogs." Frogs were not random creatures in that passage. They were a sign meant to confront and awaken. And in Exodus 8-6, it says, "Frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt." The resemblance left communities shaken, not by fear alone, but by the weight of recognition. As signs appear in ways that defy easy explanation, the question becomes personal. Are we simply watching strange events unfold, or are we being called to pause and reflect?
Whoa! What the fuck am I looking at?
What is that?
Across the quiet plains of the Midwest, something deeply unusual appeared in the sky without warning. In broad daylight, A beam of pure blue light rose straight from the horizon, steady and unmoving, cutting through the clouds above. Moments later, it expanded into a ring of glowing orange light, bright enough to outshine the midday sun. The entire phenomenon lasted less than 2 minutes, yet it left those who witnessed it frozen in silence. There was no thunder, no shockwave, no trace of any known natural or human-made event. It was not lightning, not an aurora, and not a reflection. Scientists offered theories, but no evidence followed. What unsettled people most was not the light itself, but the stillness around it. Nothing seemed disturbed, yet everything felt altered, as if the sky had spoken without using sound. At the same time, across the same region, farmers experienced a different kind of shock. They went to sleep expecting an ordinary morning, only to wake up to fields that looked lifeless. Corn, wheat, and soybeans that had shown no signs of stress the day before stood gray and brittle by sunrise. Leaves crumbled at the touch. Entire rows of crops failed overnight, without drought, without heat, and without pests. The collapse was silent and complete. In moments like this, human control feels painfully small. Farmers tested soil, water, and air, searching for a cause, yet lab results showed no external stress. The plants did not die from the outside in. Their internal systems shut down, sap stopped flowing, nutrients ceased moving. The failure began at the roots, unseen long before the damage appeared. It was a reminder that not all collapse announces itself loudly. Scripture reflects this pattern clearly. In Exodus 13:21, it is written, "The Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud, and by night in a pillar of fire." Light in the Bible is not always destruction. Sometimes it is communication. And in Mark 11:20, Jesus points to a fig tree that had withered from the roots, teaching that collapse often begins where the eye cannot see. When foundations fail, the surface soon follows. Animals began moving in ways that broke patterns formed over generations. There was no explosion to trigger flight, no visible danger to explain retreat. Something shifted, an instinct responded. The consequences were subtle, yet widespread. Traditional flyways emptied without warning. Some birds circled endlessly, as if waiting for a signal that never came, while others stopped mid-migration and settled in unfamiliar places. Weather conditions offered no explanation. Winds were calm. The skies were open, yet movement stalled, as if an unseen boundary had been drawn. In the oceans, the same pattern appeared. Marine life abandoned shallow waters they normally prefer. Rays swam in tight spirals. Dolphins surfaced in places they rarely enter, not injured, not distressed, simply redirected. Schools of fish gathered near the surface, then vanished together. There were no storms, no predators, no temperature shifts strong enough to justify the change. The water felt different to them.
No, I don't believe they released all the documents.
Though instruments could not explain why. On land, the response was even quieter. Ranchers noticed cattle refusing to pass through gates they had crossed every day. Horses avoided familiar trails. Deer gathered near roads they usually stayed away from. These were not panic reactions. There was no noise, no threat. It was hesitation, a refusal to proceed, guided by something deeper than fear. In moments like this, human certainty falls short. Biologists searched for familiar causes, disease, pressure shifts, sound waves, atmospheric changes, but nothing aligned across air, land, and sea at the same time. What stood out was not chaos, but coordination. Animals did not scatter randomly. They redirected with purpose, responding to conditions humans could not yet detect. Scripture speaks to this kind of awareness in creation. In Job 12:7-8, it says, "Ask the animals, and they will teach you, or speak to the earth, and it will teach you." And in Job 12:10, we are reminded, "In his hand is the life of every creature." The Bible suggests that creation responds before explanation arrives. Animals do not analyze meaning. They move when conditions change. When many species across multiple environments adjust at the same time, it raises a sobering question. What pressure is building beneath the surface, and why now? A growing pattern has begun to take shape, one that can no longer be dismissed as coincidence or isolated disruption. Across the United States, a series of signs has emerged, revealing a nation under strain, not only in its systems, but in its foundation. These moments do not announce themselves with a single catastrophe. Instead, they appear as overlapping signals. unfolding in different forms yet pointing in the same direction. Together, they reflect an instability that runs deeper than economics, politics, or infrastructure. They suggest a spiritual unease beneath the surface of national life. When signs arrive in clusters, they shift the meaning of what is being observed. What might once have been explained away, as chance begins to feel intentional. Patterns form, timing tightens. The land, the skies, the waters, and even living creatures respond in ways that no single explanation can fully contain. In such moments, the question is no longer whether something is happening, but whether those watching are willing to recognize what these signals are pointing toward. Throughout Scripture, warnings from God rarely arrive as sudden destruction. More often, they come as disruptions meant to awaken rather than to annihilate. They interrupt routines, unsettle assumptions, and expose the limits of human control. These warnings do not speak in human language. They speak through conditions, through changes in what was once familiar, through the quiet realization that stability is not guaranteed. When a nation continues forward without reflection, these signs multiply, not to confuse, but to call attention. The Bible consistently presents God as patient, giving time for recognition and response. In this pattern, warning precedes judgment. Stillness comes before collapse. Signs appear not to terrify, but to invite humility. When systems falter and predictability erodes, it serves as a reminder that security built without reverence is fragile. Human confidence, when detached from moral grounding, becomes vulnerable to even subtle shifts. In the case of the United States, the convergence of signs suggests more than temporary disruption.
Yeah.
It points to a moment of examination. Nations, like individuals,
I tell you what, America's being flogged with natural disasters. You'll put a fire out, then a flood will show up somewhere. You put that out, a flood will show up somewhere. And it's just never ending. We're getting flood problems and fire problems too, but we get a season to have it off, like winter and all that. We won't get them, so we get a bit of a break from it. But you guys don't look like getting any breaks at all.
are tested not only by what they endure, but by how they interpret warning. Scripture records that when people ignored early signs, greater consequences followed. Yet it also shows that when warnings were acknowledged, mercy remained possible. These signs, taken together, form a message that is not spoken aloud, but is clearly expressed. They reveal that control is limited, time is given, and attention is being requested. The instability being exposed is not meant to signal abandonment, but accountability. It is an invitation to pause, to listen, and to realign before pressure turns into breaking. What unfolds next does not depend solely on events, but on response. Warnings, by their nature, assume the possibility of change. They carry with them the hope that recognition will lead to repentance, and that humility will open the door to restoration. In this light, the signs are not declarations of the end, but moments of decision reminders that when God warns, it is because he still calls. When signs arrive not one by one but together, their meaning begins to change. A single sign may be questioned, delayed, or explained away, but when many appear at the same time, converging from different directions, they create a sense of urgency that cannot be ignored. In Scripture, such convergence is often associated with proximity, not with a distant future, but with what is drawing near. The gathering of signs suggests that that day is no longer a vague concept placed far ahead, but a reality approaching within view. The Bible consistently teaches that the nearness of that day is not revealed to satisfy curiosity, but to awaken responsibility. When patterns intensify and signals align, it is not meant to incite panic, but recognition. God does not overwhelm without purpose. He warns before he acts. The compression of signs into a single period is itself a message, indicating that time is no longer unfolding at a comfortable pace, but accelerating toward decision. In these moments, the call is not addressed to the world at large, but first to those who belong to him. Scripture is clear that judgment begins with the household of God, not as condemnation, but as correction. When warnings increase, they are directed toward awakening hearts that have grown accustomed to comfort, routine, and spiritual distance. The nearness of that day is not announced to frighten God's children, but to bring them back to alignment. Repentance in this context is not portrayed as shame or fear, but as return. It is the act of turning back before the way forward becomes blocked. God's call to repentance is an expression of mercy, not anger. He calls his children to examine where devotion is cooled, where compromise has settled in quietly, and where trust has shifted from him to systems that cannot last. The warning is gentle in form, but firm in intention. Throughout Scripture, moments preceding major divine action are marked by invitation. God sends signals, not because he desires destruction, but because he desires response. When repentance is offered, it is offered early, while there is still space to turn. Silence would signal finality. Warning signals indicate hope remains. The convergence of signs, then, serves a single purpose: to draw attention to the condition of the heart. That day approaches not as a sudden ambush, but as a scheduled meeting humanity has been told to prepare for.
Okay, guys, I'll come back to this and do the heading, the Atlantis one. Where is it? Hang on. There it is.
Metrocon's turning 50, and we're celebrating. Right now, you can get
in the torch to baking. There are many peculiar
to Kingdom Productions Network and the Remnant Report. Brother Gary Wayne is going to give about an hour or so, maybe a little more. It just depends on how things go. But he's going to give a presentation on not only how the new Atlantis or America will play a part in the end times, but he's going to be going in detail about the contents of his book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, because it has a tremendous amount to do with the topic that we're talking about tonight. And also because Brother Gary has a new book out, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy 2. So I want you guys to please stick around after the video from Timothy Alberino and the clips from the others that are along with that, because you don't want to miss Brother Gary Wayne. Okay, guys, without any further ado, here is the first part of tonight's program.
Man. At least you can share it.
Some of the information in this video is going to be quite shocking to many people, especially those of you who live in the United States. So let's begin. Manly Palmer Hall was a Canadian-born author, lecturer, astrologer, and mystic. He's best known for his 1928 work, The Secret of
Good day, Jeremiah.
Over his 70-year career, he gave thousands of lectures.
Haven't seen you in a
including
long
two
time,
at
bro.
Carnegie Hall, and published over 150 books. In 1934, he founded the Philosophical Research Society in Los Angeles, which he dedicated to the truth seekers of all time, with a research library, lecture hall, and publishing house. Many of his lectures can be found online, and his books are still in print. It's important to note that Manly P. Hall was, in fact, an occultist, a Freemason, and a Luciferian. We can see from his writings that he was deeply into the occult and that he promoted Luciferian doctrine. And
how's the boys going, mate? Guys, Jeremiah puts a photo up of his family occasionally, and he's got lovely boys he's very proud of, and he shows them a bit. And they've got a dog, and I've watched them get used to their new dog. I just got a new dog, Jeremiah, eh?
Freemasonry, without any shadow of doubt. He basically promoted the deification of man, which is found in all Luciferian doctrine, hence this quotation. He
Hey,
spoke
Phil, good to
about
see you, mate.
secret societies, secret symbols, and the secret language of symbolism, and of course, Freemasonry, because he was heavily into Freemasonry. Manly P. Hall also taught that Jesus certainly was not the way, the truth, and the life. According to him, Jesus was just one of many spiritual teachers that led humans into spiritual enlightenment. This, of course, agrees with the teachings of Theosophy and Helena Blavatsky. Manly P. Hall wrote 3 books about America: The Secret History of America, America's Assignment with Destiny, and The Secret Destiny of America.
I think Bobo's having an early night. He was going to bed early last night because he's tired, yet he stayed up until the end. So I'm pretty sure he's having a night off.
This description says, Hall reveals how shadowy mystical orders lay behind the seemingly fortuitous birth of the United States, bringing together such forgotten fragments of history as Akhenaton's monotheism, Christopher Columbus's true identity, the London prophecy delivered the year of Washington's birth, and the mysterious strain.
Was Chris Columbus's real identity? I know he was a Jew. I don't know if many people know that, but I do know he was a Jew.
Who swayed the signs of the Declaration of Independence. Manly P. Hall gives a surprisingly plausible account of the American nation as an occult experiment in enlightened self-government and religious liberty. In this description of the book, it says, is America an assignment of destiny? What is the symbol?
Jeremiah, I haven't heard of that.
Who was the mysterious stranger who swayed the signs of the Declaration of Independence? According to Lord Bacon, the new Atlantis seems to have been set apart for the great experiment of enlightened self-government, long before the Founding Fathers envisioned the rise of the American Republic. Investigating the often neglected fragments of history, evidence is presented.
Yeah, Andrew, that's because the Catholics run Ireland. That's why it's so bad.
Indicating that the seeds of democracy,
the Catholics are dead set poison,
were planted 1,000 years before the beginning of the Christian era. In the book itself, we read this. World democracy was the secret dream of the great classical philosophers. Thousands of years before Columbus, they were aware of the existence of our Western Hemisphere and selected it to be the site of the philosophic empire, i.e. the USA. The brilliant plan of the ancients has survived to our time, and it will continue to function until the great work is accomplished. The American nation desperately needs a vision of its own purpose. Further down the page, he speaks of the challenge of the leadership of the world. He says the larger problem and the great challenge is in how to set up a new order of world ethics firmly established on a foundation of democratic idealism. He speaks of international ethics and how that the world is now being conceived as one interdependent structure.
Never in all of human history has a kingdom arisen with such power, wealth, and influence as the United States. Within 200 years from the day of its founding, America ascended to the summit of supremacy, towering above every other nation on earth, with a military armament twice that of all other nations combined, and an economy that controlled the world. Was America's incredible rise to supremacy merely coincidental? Was it providential? One thing is for certain. This land of the plumed serpent was chosen long ago to be the trestle board of an ancient plan. The key that unlocks the mystery of America's secret destiny is a name, Francis Bacon. Sir Francis Bacon, without a doubt, is one of the most enigmatic personalities of the modern era. Born in London at the height of
I think he took out the Spanish Armada.
The English Renaissance on the 22nd of January, 1561, Bacon would himself become a Renaissance man of the highest caliber. Before his death on the 9th of April, 1626, this one man within 65 years would literally define the methods of modern science, as well as the parlance of modern English. But perhaps most significantly of all, he would chart the very destiny of what was to become the United States of America.
Andrew, did you see them cylinders they found under the pyramids? It seemed to be true. I don't know if it is, but they showed these big cylinders underneath the pyramids, and they're like a mile deep. And I think there's 3 of them.
Aside from his many exploits in science, philosophy, and literature, Bacon was a powerful statesman and parliamentarian, holding many titles during his illustrious career. including Attorney General, Lord Chancellor of England, Viscount of St. Alban, and Baron of Verulam, among others. He was also a favored courtier and close advisor of both Queen Elizabeth and her successor, King James. Dubbed the father of modern science, Francis Bacon has been hailed by many, including Thomas Jefferson, as one of the most influential men in all of human history. But behind the public veneer of this brilliant man lie dark and demonic
Hi,
shadows.
Zero. Welcome to the
Ironically,
channel.
Francis Bacon is widely considered within the academic community to be the archetype of empiricism and practical thinking. And yet, if truth be told, this father of modern science can also be rightly considered the father of modern esotericism. It was most likely Bacon who coined the phrase, knowledge is power. But what escapes those who employ this axiom is that the knowledge which Bacon valued most was not empirical knowledge, as they suppose, but rather esoteric knowledge. In other words, secret knowledge is the source of true power.
Okay.
It is no wonder then that Bacon himself claimed to be in possession of such secret knowledge, which he attained by his own admission through
Jeremiah, that sounds like the tall whites. They could pull off being an angel because they glow white.
intercourse with demons. Among his many affiliations with the occult, Francis Bacon was a master Kabbalist. Kabbalah is the Jewish branch of the ancient mystery schools, and like the other branches, its prime objective is the perfection and deification of man. In a word, Luciferianism. For Bacon, the empirical material sciences were merely facilitators of the greater esoteric metaphysical sciences through which secret knowledge could be attained via contact with superior spiritual beings residing outside of the physical plane, beings through whom he claimed to have received the inspiration of his life's work. In order to veil this intercourse with demons from the vigilant eyes of the Roman Catholic Church and political adversaries, he concealed his occultic practices within the sanctum of secret societies, most notably the shadowy brotherhood of the Rose and Cross, the Rosicrucians, of whom Bacon was chief. In fact, there is reason to believe that Francis Bacon was the protege of notorious wizard Dr. John Dee, who was a close friend and advisor to Queen Elizabeth and the deviser of a new brand of sorcery he called Enochian angel magic. Aside from being a sorcerer, Dee was a respected mathematician and astronomer, as well as a leading expert in navigation who trained many of the explorers that
Jeremiah, you know, it's funny. I love ancient Rome and everything about ancient Rome, the history and the whole lot of it. But the Egyptians, they never interested me, nor the Greece's kingdom. The only one that I like that I actually read up on is Rome.
will conduct England's voyages of discovery. Dee was also a prominent figure within the Order of the Rose and Cross, and was most likely the Order's Grand Master before passing the torch to Bacon. There are many peculiar stories surrounding the lives and times of both John Dee and Francis Bacon, which are in themselves highly intriguing. But what is most relevant to this analysis was their shared conviction that the legendary empire of Atlantis would rise again in the very land that is now called the United States of America. Dee and Bacon not only shared this conviction, but also labored under the guidance of non-human intelligences to make it so. Before his death in 1626, Bacon wrote a bizarre novel entitled New Atlantis. The book would not be published until 1627 by Bacon's personal secretary, William Raleigh, and never in its entirety. The traditional story holds that Francis Bacon was unable to finish the novel before his death, but many of the initiated brethren believed differently, including Manly P. Hall. The New Atlantis was first published in 1627 as a kind of appendix to the Silva Savarum, a natural history in 10 centuries. On the title page is a curious design. It shows the figure of an ancient creature representing time, drawing a female figure from a dark cavern. The meaning is obvious. Through time, the hidden truth shall be revealed. This figure is one of the most famous of the seals or symbols of the Order of the Quest. Contained within it is the whole promise of the resurrection of man and the restitution of the divine theology. It is well known among the secret societies of Europe that the second part of the New Atlantis exists. It includes a description of the great room in Solomon's house.
Okay, that they got this off Columbus. When he went to America, what day did he get there? Because does he beat Francis Bacon that who were talking about America as though it already existed? Their timeline's like 1627 or something. Was America discovered by then? It would have to be. Otherwise, we're missing something.
Wherein are displayed the crests and the coats of arms of the governors of the philosophic empire. It may be for this reason that the writings were suppressed, for these crests and arms belong to real persons who might have been subjected to persecution, as Sir Walter Raleigh was, if their associate.
They're doing Manly P. Hall's advice now. They're playing his book out now, How to Start a War with the Muslims. He's done all that. He's behind all this.
With the secret order had been openly announced. The New Atlantis is a fictional narrative, but with a non-fictional plot that may have served as the very blueprint for the formulation of the government of the United States of America and the esoteric organization that would control it from behind the scenes. In many ways, the New Atlantis is a manifesto of the secret society, a public confession, though concealed in a parlance perceived only by the initiated, concerning the construction of a utopian Christian society that would be ruled by a pagan philosophic priesthood, a priesthood dedicated to the doctrine and the execution of the Luciferian agenda. The following is a brief summation of the New Atlantis. The story begins with a group of seafaring Europeans who set out on a voyage from the shores of Peru, but after being swept up in wayward winds, are driven far from their intended destination to the shores of an uncharted and mysterious island, whose name, they are told, is Ben Salem, or Son of Peace in Hebrew. The seafarers soon discover that Ben Salem is a utopian Christian society governed by an order of philosophic priests called the Society of Solomon's House, which house or college, my good brethren, is the very eye.
Ooh, mommy, now that's a pizza. Get more with Australian mushrooms.
Sex moves fast, but I move faster.
Australia does great pizzas. Our pizza shops make great pizzas.
Pluralsight has the in-demand skills I needed to stand out. I don't fear change. I embrace it.
Bendigo Bank show that our business matters to them.
We're more than just a spreadsheet. They've trusted us as people and put faith in us. Definitely 100% give Bendigo Bank a call.
Nah.
I sort of left you with a revelation that many of you were not prepared to receive. Tonight I'm going to continue and back it up.
No, Zeus is not Michael. Zeus is a fallen angel. He's not Michael.
With a lot of facts. Remember, a lot of the meat of this little mini series that we're doing this week comes from a book entitled Scarlet and the Beast, written by John Daniel. Now, it covered a lot of territory.
Hey, bye-bye. Good to see you, mate.
The beast must resemble with at least 14 points exactly ancient Rome. So we'll begin tonight setting out some of these similarities between Rome and the United States of America. From 100 to 300 AD, most of pagan Rome converted to Christianity. And when this nation was founded, 67% of America's population was Christian. Christians in Rome suffered severe persecution. Christians in America were fleeing European persecution. Rome, ladies and gentlemen, in its time was the melting pot of the world. And today, one of the well-known phrases is that America is the melting pot of the world. Rome was a democracy based upon a two-party system, the optimates and the populares.
That's why Rome fell apart. Too many immigrants in their military, not just as civilians. Like they'd use the Germans to be the royal guards of the emperors, and they just used a lot of people from other countries.
And the United States of America,
Okay.
they say is a democracy. It was really founded as a republic, but today a democracy based upon a two-party system, the Democrats and the Republicans. Rome had a divided balance of power, the Roman tribune and his Senate. America has the divided balance of power, the American president and his Congress. Rome was based on specific laws. They had 12 tables. America is based on specific laws, our Constitution. Rome protected the rights of its citizens. America, up until recently, protected the rights of its citizens. In Rome, all men were equal. That was the international law of Rome. And
I love how he said until recently, so he's not going to sugarcoat it because he's American.
America, all men are equal according to the Declaration of Independence. But let me set that straight. All men in the Declaration of Independence were created equal. All men are not equal. And in Rome, all men, even though they said they were equal, were not. Those are facts. Within history, you will see. Rome had a sordid history of slavery. America also had a sordid history of slavery. Rome was capitalistic. America is capitalistic. Rome practiced abortion as a means of population control. And the United States of America practices abortion as a form of birth control. Rome loved R-rated entertainment. Look at the history of Pompeii. And here in the United States of America, we protect R-rated entertainment under the First Amendment as freedom of speech. Rome had a welfare program funded by taxes. You all know that we also have a welfare budget, and many take advantage of it. In fact, our welfare budget rivals our military budget. Rome had a thriving business in lawsuits. America also has a thriving business in lawsuits. Sports was Rome's pastime. And in America, football dominates fall and winter, basketball winter and spring, and baseball spring and summer. And I know some men who don't know anything more than the sports statistics for their favorite teams. And they think they're brilliant because of it. Ancient Rome's national emblem was the single-headed eagle pointing west. America's national emblem is the single-headed eagle pointing west. From 300 to 500 AD, the Roman Church was weakened spiritually because of pagan infiltration. And after 200 years, the Church in America has also been weakened spiritually because of Masonic infiltration, which is nothing more than the ancient pagan religion of Babylon. So we have not only met 14, ladies and gentlemen, we've gone beyond 14 if you were counting. Most historians also attribute the name America to the explorer Amerigo Vespucci. Freemasonry, however, has a different point of view, and this will be new to most of you. For according to Freemasonry and author Manly Hall, a 33rd degree Freemason, the Indians in Central and South America say the name came from their gods who were peace-loving. For example, the supreme god of the Mayan culture of Central America was known as Quetzalcoatl, a light-skinned god who wore a long white robe covered with red crosses. And carved in stones of his temples were serpents. Quetzalcoatl was known as the peace-loving serpent god. The same god in Peru was known as Ameru, the god of peace. He was pictured as a plumed serpent. Ameru's territory was known as Amaruca. The 1895 issue of the publication called Lucifer, a periodical published by Freemason Blavatsky's Theosophical Society, states this, quote, "From the latter comes our word America. Amaruca is literally translated land of the plumed serpent. The priests of this god of peace once ruled the Americas. All the red men who have remained true to the ancient religion are still under his sway." And according to author William T. Still, Manly Hall claims that since the serpent is frequently symbolic of Lucifer, it is no exaggeration to extrapolate from this that America may well mean, quote, land of Lucifer, end quote. We already have discussed the hierarchy in Freemasonry and that they consider Lucifer to be the good, benevolent, and peace-loving God. Their philosophy is known as the Luciferian philosophy, and it goes something like this. Man was held prisoner by an unjust, vindictive, and jealous God in the Garden of Eden. He was bound in the chains of ignorance. Man was set free by Lucifer through his agent Satan when man was given the gift of intellect, and through the use of this intellect, man himself would.
Why would God create him in a chain like that and then have a serpent talk him around? Why would God have you chained like that if you're going to be the representation of mankind?
Will become God. That is the Luciferian promise, the promise of Satan to Eve in the Garden of Eden. Now remember, these are all metaphors. I don't believe for 1 minute that there was a naked man and woman standing by a tree and a snake came up and talked to them. These are.
I do. I believe it 100%. I don't know what sort of snake, but I believe it 100%.
Substitutes, symbols for something much, much deeper, much deeper. America is known as the good, benevolent, and peace-loving nation. We've also discussed the seal of the Illuminati, the unfinished pyramid. Its capstone and its all-seeing eye represents the kingdom of Lucifer. The image of this Luciferian masterpiece makes up half of the Great Seal of the United States of America. Just look at a $1 bill. And Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 12, tells us that Lucifer was the epitome of beauty, America the beautiful, may therefore be a sinister figure of speech for Lucifer the beautiful. Freemason Manly P. Hall states that when Atlantis died, so did the ideal pattern of government. According to Hall, the League of 10 Kings is part of the secret doctrine preserved by secret societies through their oral traditions. Hall believes that when the unifying force of the 10 Kings was broken, destruction automatically followed. So complete was this destruction, he writes, that men forgot there is a better way of life and accepted the evils of war and crime and poverty as inevitable. The old Atlantis is gone, dissolved in a sea of human doubts, but the philosophical empire would come again as a democracy of wise men. This connects directly with the protocols of the wise men of Sion. Freemasonry planned long ago to philosophically raise Atlantis out of the sea, and in this new land reestablish democracy as a new world order, Novus Ordo Seclorum. Masonic author George H. Steinmetz confirms in Freemasonry its hidden meaning that the democratic philosophy of Freemasonry has been traced back to the lost continent of Atlantis. He attempts to prove that Atlantis was a Masonic society by suggesting that the destroyed temples of Upper Egypt are all part of that Atlantean destruction. There, in Egypt, we find their ruined temples, which compared with our lodge rooms, have similar floor plans, the same dark north, and many of the same emblems. And remember, the Lion King to the north was darkness and desolation. Finally, Steinmetz says that one cannot understand the universality of Freemasonry without accepting the Atlantean account. Hall concurs. Masonry is a university teaching the liberal arts and sciences of the soul to all who will attend to its words. It is a shadow of the great Atlantean mystery school which stood with all its splendor in the ancient city of the Golden Gates, where now the turbulent Atlantic rolls in unbroken sweep. And I bet you wondered why they named the bridge in San Francisco the Golden Gate Bridge. Now you know. Hall suggests that the antediluvian civilization was democratic, that Freemasonry planned over 3 centuries
I never knew that about the Golden Bridge. Wow.
ago to recreate a universal democratic society that will philosophically rise up out of the sea, and like Atlantis, join with 10 kings to lead mankind in the pursuit of universal happiness. And what is the sea? Remember, the sea is the mass of humanity, great numbers of people. To rise up out of the sea is to establish through revolution, and that's coming. He says that the Christian church has delayed the search for the new Atlantis, and that's why they hate Christians, and Christians, like Orthodox Jews and the followers of the Prophet Muhammad, are scheduled for extermination in the New World Order. And he alludes to the ancient Roman Empire as the last attempt at resurrection of the Atlantean project, and states that another attempt would be made. And we can see how Freemasonry's planned resurrection of Atlantis correlates with Daniel's prophecy of a revived Roman Empire. Likewise, John's vision of the beast with 10 horns, representing 10 kings,
Do I see how to make it look like candy?
is more significant in this regard, given the fact that Freemasonry calls for its one world government to be patterned after the Atlantean League of 10 Kings. Therefore, to locate the headquarters of Freemasonry's new philosophical Atlantis, Daniel's revived Roman Empire, and John's beast, we must search for a land that meets the following requirements. 1. If old Atlantis was democratic, then new Atlantis will be democratic and most likely be born of Templar French Freemasonry, the father of modern socialism. 2. John's beast and Freemasonry's philosophical Atlantis will figuratively
It's not raining frogs, is it?
rise up out of the sea in the Atlantic Ocean, somewhere west of the Straits of Gibraltar, where old Atlantis was alleged to have sunk, and will be established through revolution from out of the masses of people. 3. If resurrected west of the Straits of Gibraltar, Daniel's revived Rome will be a new land and a new world populated from the territory of the old Roman Empire. 4. Daniel's uncivilized beast will be born in an uncivilized western land bordered by water. From Daniel's vantage point at Babylon, a land in the extreme west. 5. John's beast will eventually unite with 10 kings, as did old Atlantis, or will be divided into 10 regions according to the plan or the world model of the Club of Rome. And on its model, the world will also be divided into 10 regions. Unlike Edgar Casey, Manly P. Hall is not looking for ancient Atlantis to literally rise out of the sea, and neither am I, and neither should you, but I know that some of you at least have, are, and will continue to look for the sea as the literal source of the rising of the new landmass, which will be called Atlantis. And you understand the symbology, the metaphors. You are looking at the exoteric. Manatee Hall rather looks to America as the nation that will represent philosophical Atlantis, and so do I. And through my studies, I know for a fact that this is it, for they have made the admission over and over and over again in their writing, the esoteric writings of the secret societies, all of them. America's assignment with destiny, Manatee Hall writes, quote, the explorers who opened the New World operated from a master plan and were agents of rediscovery rather than discoveries, end quote. And when Columbus landed upon the beach, instead of planting the flag of Spain, whom he was supposed to represent in his discovery, instead, ladies and gentlemen, this great explorer, who instead of carrying the cross of Christianity upon the sails of his ship, carried the cross, the red cross of the Knights Templars, planted a green flag with a white cross. In the second book, called The Secret Destiny of America, Manatee Hall claims that the unifying goal of ancient secret societies was to create a new Atlantis beyond the Atlantic Ocean in what is now called America. The bold resolution, he said, was that this Western continent should become the site of the philosophic empire. Still explains that America, according to this great plan, was to become the first nation to begin to establish a universal democracy or a world commonwealth of nations. This quest was said to be the most noble pursuit to which a man could devote himself. And ladies and gentlemen, I would have to agree with that statement if it were done honestly and openly and for the noble purpose for which they claim. But we know that it is built upon lies and deception and manipulation, and that the men bringing it about, and it is all men, they do not practice what they preach. They are liars, deceivers, and manipulators. And there is nothing noble about the goal of these scum. The first modern philosopher to promote America as the new Atlantis was Sir Francis Bacon, who lived from 1561 to 1626. He was an English lord and Zionist Rosicrucian. As an occultist well-versed in the Great Plan, also known as the Enterprise, Bacon concealed the secret doctrine in a novel entitled New Atlantis, in which he laid out the plan for a utopian society to be built on this newly discovered continent. Masonic authors Marie Bauer Hall and Manly P. Hall respectively say of Bacon, and I quote, Bacon is the founder of Freemasonry, the guiding light of the Rosicrucian order, the members of which kept the torch of true universal knowledge, the secret doctrine of the ages, alive during the dark night of the Middle Ages. Bacon had been initiated into the new liberalism represented throughout Europe by secret societies of intellectuals dedicated to civil and religious freedom. Later, when the moment was propitious, he threw the weight of his literary group with the English colonization plan for America, cherishing, as he did, the dream of a great commonwealth in the new Atlantis, end quote. This great plan has been perpetuated by an international group of only the highest initiates of the secret societies, as I have revealed to you over the years.
Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome to the Remnant Report. I am the Remnant Warrior, and this is a special revealing prophecy edition of the Remnant Report. And tonight we've got a special guest, and he needs no introduction, but I'm going to allow him to introduce himself. Welcome, brother.
Hi, my name is Gary Wayne, and I've written a book called The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants.
That's got 90 chapters in it, the first book. I haven't seen the second book yet. I've got the first book and I've read about 5 chapters. It's really heavy reading. It does your head in a bit.
Plan to enslave humankind. It's a book that I spent 30 years in research and
it's a great
writing
book.
The book.
Yeah.
It was one of those books that I thought I wanted to write. I wanted to.
Now look at some of the chapters there. The Great Deluge, Azula, the leader of the Watchmen, Lucifer's Revenge, the Blackheads, Royal Bloodlines. It's got everything in here, guys.
Discuss and connect how this very, very strange verse and chapter in Genesis 6, connects to so much else of the Bible and what has taken place in history. And what caught my attention was this very odd few lines in the opening to actually what is the flood narrative. And so how did that connect to the flood narrative? And that's where the sons of God went to the daughters of men, and they produced Nephilim. And in some translations, like the King James Version, it actually says giants instead of Nephilim. And it also said that these Nephilim were before and after the flood. And so how did that happen if everyone was destroyed except for Noah and his family on the flood? And then all these giants pop up after the flood, names like Abites and Emites and Samsonites and Raphaites and Anakites and on and on and on. All of these giant nations that show up after the flood and what their influence was, and then connect that through how it relates to end time prophecy, because we have in end time prophecy fallen angels and demons that take place in the last times. And there's also a very interesting prophecy and a sign of the times given by our Redeemer Jesus when he was asked about the signs of the times, and he said it would be just as it was in the days of Noah and just as in the days of Lot.
Actually, they're about 5 pages long, and they cover different topics. Like one will be on the gnomes and the elves, one will be on the tall white aliens, and bloodlines of the Freemasons. It's more than 2 pages of topic, Bobo. This guy's legit.
So all of a sudden now we have
and it's about 5 or 6 pages till he outlines what he's talking about. Then he drops that and brings up another brand new subject. He's fascinating. Even if it was a fairy tale, it'd be fascinating the way he says it.
Possibility of Nephilim or giants and fallen angels and demons being very much involved as a major sign for the end times. And also the interesting connection, what is, in the Luke's version of that prophecy, what is their connection to Sodom?
Yeah, baby, but the writing small like the Bible because it's got to get so many words in per page.
I wanted to create a narrative that made some sense in my mind, and it's trying to come up with a rational explanation that makes sense biblically. I decided I wanted to bring in a connection that I thought might be obvious, that there were giants recorded in every other culture around the world, on every continent. And was that just a coincidence, or was it telling the same kind of story? And as I was doing that research, I came across documents and books and information about a society that everybody is familiar with called Freemasonry, that actually takes their prehistory legends all the way back to the same time frame as Genesis 6 and before, with another parallel account, albeit from a different belief system and a different perspective. And all of a sudden that brought the secret societies into this whole narrative that starts in prehistory, also crosses the flood. And so I wanted to connect that. So the book at some point in time went from a narrative just about Nephilim to a book about the creation and the rise of the Nephilim and their kingships, alongside the mystical religions and the secret societies that rose up around them, partnered with them, somehow crossed the flood, and continue to this day. We have the sons of God going to the daughters of men, creating the Nephilim, which became the heroes of old and men of renown. And so when we look at some original translations there, we look at the sons of God and who were they, the Nephilim, who exactly were they, and then the heroes of old and the men of renown, which is the hero, is the Hebrew word Gibron. And so then we have in how people will interpret this verse, who actually are these people? And so that's the contentious issues that you're referring to, and is argued from all different aspects. So just let me slowly walk through who these 3 groups or 3 names of groups actually were, and why it is exactly as it is written in Genesis 6. And so the sons of God, many people believe that they were just the sons of Seth, and therefore these weren't actually giants. They were just another branch of people that came up that were evil. Well, that's a very good interpretation, because if you go into the New Testament and we talk about the sons of God, those are just human beings. Or if we talk about the children of Israel, those are just average human Israelites. So what makes the sons of God in Genesis 6 actually fallen angels? Well, the original translation is the Bene Elohim, and that stands for the sons of God. And if we want to go for an exact Old Testament interpretation, we need to go to Job, the book of Job, and in
Do you know what, Bobo? People have said that to me before I should write a book. I'd write a good knockabout book about my life. It was a real knockabout for a long time. I'd actually write an interesting book. I can put words together, I can articulate, so I could actually pull a book off.
3 particular verses in Job, it translates angels with an asterisk and an annotation at the bottom of the page that in ancient Hebrew, angels were the sons of God.
Yeah.
And so if we look at the 2 other possible translations, the children of Israel in the Old Testament and the sons of God in the New Testament.
Yeah, Bobo, you guys would come in after I've been saved, because that's when things started going good for me.
We find that those 2 translations, the first one is the children of Israel. That is actually a prophecy for the end time and beyond. So that's not referring to the same sons of God that are in Genesis 6. And in the New Testament, it's a doctrine of adoption into being a sons of God. So it comes at the Pentecost, and it has no direct relationship to what's being referred to in the Old Testament, in particular Genesis 6. So I'm on pretty sound ground. I think that, although I understand the argument that people think that they're regular men, if they were just regular men marrying the daughters of regular men, they wouldn't produce giants. I mean, something would have to be going on that is completely different, and you would have to act.
And that's how you know we didn't sleep with Satan. People try to say beguiled means slept with, but a child was Abel and Cain. They weren't giants, so that's incorrect. People think that.
Actually add to the narrative to make some sort of sense of it. And so now we move into the word Nephilim, which actually translates as the fallen ones. And so some people say that those were the angels and not, and that the giants were actually the Gibberim, and I'll get to Gibberim next, which are the men of renown. Well, if we look at mythologies from around the world, and people have probably heard people like out of the mythologies, like in Greek, where we have the Titans, or we have the Anunnaki in Sumerian mythology. The Titans were 2 different groups. One was...
Okay, you want to see what a Titan looks like? Go on Mud Fossils University, and they show a few of them.
Giants, and one were the gods. And so if we look at the Anunnaki in Sumerian mythology, we have the same thing. So we have 2 groups. One was giants and one was gods. And so the second group, which is the offspring of the gods and human females in polytheist and philosophy and mythology, they produced earthborn gods. And we need to understand that the Nephilim were like a demigod. And they were a demigod in both the Genesis account and on all other accounts around the world. So they were part God or part fallen angel in the monotheist belief system, our belief system. And they were also part God and part human in all the other belief systems. So we have something that's rather unique, and it's a very consistent narrative around the world. And so again, humans copulating with other humans can produce demigods. And so when people want to confuse Nephilim, even though it's a specific separate word with the sons of God, which is one of the other arguments, they're confusing the 2, even though you can have the same name. We know from translations that the sons of God were always the Bene Elohim. They were not called Nephilim in the monotheist belief system. Now, many people say that the Nephilim weren't giants and supergiants. They were just Gibberim, men of renown and heroes of old. The Gibberim weren't necessarily Nephilim, but they were kings and they were potentates and they were evil potentates. And so when Gibberim is used later in the Old Testament, we see it come up in Ezekiel when it's talking about very powerful kings, and we also see it come up when it's talking about Nimrod. And I do understand maybe people think that Nimrod was a giant, but I'll argue it was actually Gibberim, and that was a specific application for Nimrod as a hero of old. And so people's argument will be is yes, they were powerful kings, but they weren't giants. What people need to understand is the Bible is very specific in the application of the words, and it's always one.
Hi, B.B. Jackson. Welcome to the channel.
Contradictions. So Nephilim were both giants and kings and evil potentates. So you could be a Gibberim and be human and be an evil potentate, but that doesn't necessarily make you Nephilim. But the Nephilim were both. And in the old world and immediately after the flood, the Nephilim they usurped all of the kingships. And they controlled all the royal dynasties and they ruled over humankind. So we have those three entities. We have the sons of God, we have the Gibberim, and we have the Nephilim. Now, if we go over to Greek mythology, people will understand if we talk about Hercules or Theseus or any of the famous titans. They might be surprised to know that when we go into the ancient annals recording these mythologies, they were also known as the men of renown and heroes of old. And again, these were giants and they were demigods and they were the sons of gods. And so I think when we have
Paris and Achilles and Hector, they were Nephilim as well. They were half human, half angel, fallen angel.
Coincidence such as this that crosses over to other religions and other mythologies, and there's more of these testimonies around the world, that we need to take probably into account that when there are parallel accounts, they're telling a similar story, perhaps from a different perspective, but understand that they're telling the same story. And so when we look at these giants being the kings, we have to start looking at their dynasties and the bloodlines that descended from them that exist to this day. And also in Genesis 6, we look at the controversial statement that Nephilim were both before and after them.
I don't think the Nephilim are anointed. I really don't. I can't see how that'd be the case anywhere.
What? So we have.
It's not like the four horses getting released. It's not like they're anointed. I suppose they are.
To take into account, did angels go and copulate a second time after the flood to create giants, or did giants somehow survive?
Either that, or some giants were like mermaids and they could live underwater, or they did have the technology back then. Did they build a little submarine? Could have.
Flood. And I'll take that on in the book and provide both explanations as possible. And I think people will be very, very surprised at the amount of evidence to support both. Now, the daughters of men would be the other component of Genesis 6. And most people assume that that's just going to be the descendants of Cain. And I bring this up, and I'll prove in the book that likely they were the descendants of Cain and that they were predisposed to create this sin. That it was the daughters of Cain that mated with the sons of angels in the sixth generation, the generation of Jared, to produce the giants. And what's important about this is to understand Genesis 6. We need to understand what happened immediately after and immediately before. So Genesis 6 is actually the introduction to the flood narrative. So by implication, and there is no separation from the discussion and the introduction of these giants that goes immediately into the flood narrative. So by implication, the story is likely connected, and I'll connect that in the book and have people understand that. But we also need to understand that there were 6 generations before the giants were created. And that's when we need to understand and learn about why the Bible records the descendants of Cain and the descendants of Seth. And so Seth would be the lineage that Noah came from, and then Cain had another whole line of descendants that in prehistory also were reported as kings. So we have this kingship concept, which is not a natural concept for our religion or old Jewish religion, because kingship didn't happen in our religion until the time of King Saul, which was thousands of years later. So the king concept is a polytheist concept that actually started in Genesis with the Nephilim and with Cain before that. But when we start digging into the Cain sort of background and what was going on in prehistory, we start to learn about the rise of the mystical religions that the Nephilim imposed over the whole people of the earth. And so then we need to learn about how this mysticism arises.
Like a normal person, just because they're anointed, it's not like they glow.
And that starts with the 7 sacred sciences and the illicit knowledge that came from the fallen angels to the descendants of Cain. And so that's one of the big reasons why they were so predisposed to create this violation against the laws of creation, where the seed or the spirit of heaven was going to be married with the flesh of the earth and create gods of the earth. So one of the primary sort of doctrines of the early part of my book is I'm going to make a case that is a violation against the laws of creation. Now, these sciences and this additional information that came from the fallen angels developed into all of the major arts and sciences that we know of today. But it's how far they were able to develop these sciences and how they were able to pervert that. And to secret that knowledge, they created a mystical religion. And it was...
Wasn't Lucifer the angel that done music, done musicianship and all that? And apparently he's in charge of the music on the planet. So you can see how successful his plan is. Pretty sure that's right. Lucifer's the angel of, I don't know how to say it, musicianship.
Sun worship religion, and Enoch, son of Cain.
Artist, that's what I meant.
And not Enoch, son of or descendant of Seth. We need to understand there's 2 Enochs in prehistory. And so Enoch, son of Cain, developed this whole knowledge base into a knowledge-based religion that people might know today as Gnosis or Gnosticism. And again, this is all connected. And so they secreted all of this advanced knowledge into these mystical religions, into an initiatory religion, which is where Freemasonry started. And actually, Freemasonry comes from Masonry, which is the 5th science of geometry. And so when we look at the craft legends from Freemasonry, understand they say and they recognize whether it's Tubal-Cain or Enoch or any of the descendants of Cain as their patriarchs and the founders of this these secret societies to house this information. And they took this information to such a level that they claim that, and I want to understand, they claim that they created the great monuments of the world that mystifies people today, monuments like Stonehenge or monuments like the pyramids. This is their recollection, and this is the same types of secret societies that we see today. So we see this partnership that happened in the antediluvian world, and for people who don't know that word, that's just a large word or technical word for before the flood. And so we have this rise of, in the 6th generation, of the giants which usurp the kingships. They partner then with the mystical religions from the Cain line and the secret societies to govern the people, the kingships, and to build the monuments. So we have this major partnership that now becomes an answer for why is that so important in Genesis 6 leading to the flood? Because violence was everywhere, evil was everywhere, and not respecting the true God of the universe and not worshiping the God was absolutely omnipresent, because they implemented this belief system universally and with force. And so by the time of Noah, only Noah and his family were not perverted by this tyranny that was going on by the Nephilim kingships and the religion that they had spun off. And thus came the flood. Okay, so let's now talk a little bit more about the religion, the sun worship, Sabaism, as some people might know of it, and relate that to the flood story in the religion of the Nephilim and the people before the flood. And I think people are going to recognize that this is very, very familiar to what actually crossed the flood as well, because again, it was the same religion. And so when we talk about the mystical religions, it is a sun worship. And I think in all the different mythologies that people know around the world and all the different religions around the world, it's basically a sun worship religion. And it's a pantheon of gods. And those are the two connections. And so how this connects together is that the fallen angels, and perhaps even fallen angels mating with fallen angels to create a lower set of gods in the pantheon, with the Nephilim as the earthborn gods, and the kingships at the lower level of this pantheon is the polytheist religions. And it's the same pantheon that is all around the world. It doesn't matter whether or not it's in Greece or it's in Central America or if it's India. It is the same religion, and it is the same pantheon. And so the fallen angels make up the pantheon along with whatever they created thereafter. And so these are the same dark angels that mated with the sons or the daughters of men to create these giants. And so there's 200 of them that actually went to Mount Hermon, then started the first generation of immortal giants. And so the demons that people refer to and were also part of what they call hero worship, which comes out of Greek mythology, these were the bodiless spirits of the giants. So the first generation of giants was created immortal because they had the immortal spirit of the angels, but their bodies weren't immortal. So those bodies either died out or they committed suicide to prevent the pain of the aging body. But those spirits were not permitted into heaven. And so that's the demons that Jesus talks about in the New Testament. And the crime for creating these giants were that those dark angels, who I would call impassioned, they were locked away in the abyss. And these are the same angels in the abyss that will be released in the end time. So as a violation against the laws of creation, that was the punishment. Okay, so now we have the religion of Enoch, which is a sun-worshiping religion based in mysticism and the secret sciences and initiations and sacrifices and all sorts of what we would look at as abominations, whether it's orgies or sexual perversion and on and on and on, was all created for the flood. And so people knew that there was a apocalypse coming, and so they were forewarned by the angels, the fallen angels. And so they needed to find a way to protect this information and get it across the flood. And that's what the sons of Lamech, and just so that people understand, there's a Lamech on the Seth line and there's a Lamech on the Cain line. And that's where a lot of this sort of meshing together of the bloodlines and confusing of scripture and information as to who was who in prehistory. Those sons and daughters, and Nama was the daughter involved, they reinvigorated this religion and mysticism and in their generation, which was the generation after the creation of the giants. And they found a way to record the information in terms of what those sciences and religions were, and where Enoch had created 9 vaults with like 36,525 books that were hidden away. And so that was how this information crossed the flood and how the religion crossed the flood. The key thing to remember is this is the same polytheist religion that we have all around the world. And I think it will resonate with people. Just as when we look at what will resonate in those cultures is all of this sort of dragon and snake imagery. And that's because the fallen angels were seraphim angels, and they had the face of a viper. And so you put wings on a translucent spirit being, and you have a form of a dragon, which is also the first form in the fairy mythology, because there are 4 fairies. And in their mythology, there are the opalescent fairies that came from other planets, who produced the earthborn fairies, which is the Nephilim. And then there was the demons, or the daemons, as they would call them. And those are the spirits of the first generation of Nephilim that died out. And then you have the elemental, which is the 4th one. And there's 3 classes of little people, where now we could talk down the road about a connection to the alien mythology, because that's directly related. And so this information crossed the flood, and it turns out that the person that we just talked about before, Nimrod, partners with a fellow called Hermes at Babel. And they find this information and they resurrect it. And you get a hint of how powerful this information is at Babel when it says in that story about the Tower of Babel that now, working together and speaking as one language, there's nothing that is impossible for them. And what they're building is they're building a ziggurat and a fortress very similar to what was going on in the antediluvian world. They were recreating the same rebellion that caused the flood after the flood. But the question gets to be is how did the giants survive the flood, or were they recreated after the flood? Because you could interpret Genesis 6 either way. So if we look at a second impassioned violation, and we already know that the original Nephilim, or the original fallen angels, were put into the abyss as punishment for creating the giants, then that means if there's another violation, then the next one is absolutely at a spike to recreate these giants. And it's certainly one possibility. There's nothing really in the Bible that says that there was a second impassioned violation. But if we go into other...
Yeah, Bobo, that's not what our channel's about. If we disagree on something, we talk properly about it. We don't say, oh, you're about to get owned. Man, if I even let loose on some of the stuff I know on him, he'd freak. I was so disappointed he carried on like that.
Mythologies and other religions, we do get that. So let me cover off a couple of that, and I'll cover off the other possibilities of Nephilim surviving the flood.
Diane, he's a guy I met a long time ago. He saw my OSD code, and from there somehow we got talking, and he rings me every 6 or 7 months and I have a bit of a chat. He turned Christian, and I've been helping him with that. And he had all these questions. I said, well, come on the stream and ask the guys. Maybe we can help you out. He said, okay, I'll do that. So he shows up, and straight away he lays into me. I'm trying to help him, and he lays into me. And this guy, yeah, not cool. So he wasn't from Bobo. He's from near my place. Lives about 40 miles away.
To mythology as an example that people would know, 2 for sure. I think Greek mythology and Sumerian mythology. And in the Greek, not in the Greek, let's go to the Sumerian one first. The Epic of Gilgamesh is something that everybody's taught in school, and it's used as a representative argument that the Bible copied down the Epic of Gilgamesh, and the Epic of Gilgamesh is the original text for the flood story. So they're a very similar story on the macro level, but totally different on the detail aspect of it. So when we look at Gilgamesh, here is a figure that is recorded in the book of Enoch as being before the flood, and was actually aware of the flood that was coming, even though he knew there was nothing that they could do to prevent it. And in the Epic of Gilgamesh, he is known as an Anunnaki, what we would call Nephilim from a Christian perspective, that survived the flood. And he was a demigod as described in the Epic of Gilgamesh. So he was part divine, part human, and he was a giant and a evil giant. And
when he went after Bobo, I thought it was funny. I thought, if these two get into it, this will be good. But he was such an a-hole, we couldn't wait for him to do it.
The person he tells the story to is a fellow called Enkidu. Now, Enkidu is created after the flood, and in the same manner as Gilgamesh was before the flood, and in the same manner as all giants were created around the world. And he was created as a counterbalance to prevent the evil that Gilgamesh was capable of doing and did both before and after the flood. But he becomes friends with Gilgamesh as opposed to counterbalancing, and they actually partner more into evil. So this is the second character in the preamble that's introduced in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and he too is a demigod created by the gods and a human female. And so they're telling a story about the flood story, about, depending on which language you want to translate it from, the two names that are most common are Utnapishtim and Ziusudra as the king of...
Guys, I watched this movie a couple of nights ago called Gabriel, and when the angel got injured, they could heal themselves like Wolverine does, and then they get a lot of the X-Men stuff from the fallen angels. So I thought, oh, maybe that's how giants, that's why they had to lop off Goliath's head, because otherwise he'll heal himself.
Mesopotamia or Sumeria before the flood, and he takes he's warned by the gods that there is a flood coming, and to take a similar type of an account as in Noah, to take animals on this ark, and to take many people of his family and much of his kin. So we now assume that Gilgamesh was probably akin to Ziusudra. And so he's the archetypical Anunnaki Nephilim potentate. So he's not this sort of peaceful agrarian. He's this military warrior, evil potentate that we talked about. And so is his family that he takes along with him. So just in the preamble to their flood story, we're talking about giants and their account of surviving the flood. And also in there, with Enkidu, with that creation, that also echoes a possible second violation to the laws of creation. If you look at Greek mythology, it's basically Pyrrha or Nora as the wife of Deucalion, and Noria will have several names, especially in the Gnostic religion and other mythologies, but they believe that Deucalion and Pyrrha or Noria was the same as Noah. And that's the Greek translation. Well, that's not actually true. And so what we find is that Deucalion is the son of Prometheus. And again,
thanks,
in Greek mythology, Prometheus was both a god and a titan. And so we have an interesting relationship there again. So we understand this, that...
Phil and Diane will remember this, maybe Talia will. But, I was going to say...
Deucalion was either the son of a Titan Nephilim or was a Nephilim son of Prometheus the god, but either way, he's an Nephilim. And in the Gnostic religion, they believe Noria is just a derivative of Nama, which was one of the descendants of Cain and daughter of Lamech that we just talked about. So now we have a combining of the story of another Nephilim survival. And when we look at all the accounts of prehistory, most of the accounts of prehistory in other religions and other mythologies are actually the survival of giants on an ark, or they went to a mountain. And there are some other stories about humans, but the ones that survive are the survival accounts of giants. And if we also look to the Gnostic religion, which has a Christian sort of gloss to it, but it is distinctly polytheist and is distinctly the old religion, they also have an account of a particular character in prehistory called Seth, but this would be Anamaka Seth, And this would be another race of giants that was created in a cloud. So it was sort of a DNA manipulation as another account that would be similar to what might be happening in the alien mythology. So we do have an account of DNA manipulation and creating a superhuman Nephilim in prehistory from the Gnostic religions, just as we can look at other DNA manipulation with centaurs and other beings that just aren't around anymore, and particularly the crossbreeding of species and things like that. And also
it's in the history books, I don't know where, about ancient Rome, and one of the emperors mentioned seeing a centaur in honey. It was half horse, half human. So they actually existed. I believed it anyway.
religion, they have a very, very specific accounts and several accounts of Sodom and Gomorrah, and that these were not cities of evil, because in the polytheist belief system, these were cities of light, cities of knowledge. And they believe that in these writings, at least it says in these writings, that there was another planting of this race, the giant race, in Sodom and in Gomorrah after the flood. So we take from that they record another violation against the laws of creation. So we have a couple different ways. We have both ways that are possible, and perhaps both did happen. And if we look at the biblical account to say, is that possible at Sodom and Gomorrah, that's where the second violation occurred? It is very possible, because in Genesis 14, we talk about a war of 4 kings against 5, and there's a Mesopotamian alliance that invades the Middle East. And all these nations that are listed are giant nations, whether it's the Amorites or the Amalekites or the Abites or the Emites, and on and on and on and on. And there's several battles that take place. And this is at the time of Abraham and Lot. That's the invading army from Mesopotamia that Lot is taken captive of, that we're talking about. And then shortly thereafter, Sodom is destroyed. So there's a definite connection that Nephilim were there. They were the kings of the civilizations after the flood and after Babel, and likely a large reason for destroying Sodom and Gomorrah, and why it had descended so far down into abominations and evil. And so if we look again scripturally, how were giants able to survive the flood? And when we take into account that the flood story says that basically all human beings were wiped out, all land creatures were wiped out. So how can this be? So it's either somehow they survived the flood, or there was a second violation against the flood. Now I'm going to bring in something that people kind of overlook. It does say in the flood story that the flood was designed to wipe out all the life forms that were created by God. And so you have a possible skirting or very specific wording that did not include beings created by fallen angels. And so when you understand that fallen angels were created through the daughters of men, perhaps not all of them were wiped out, and perhaps the stories of prehistory are true, with all of these different cultures around the world recording that these giants actually survived the flood, either going to a mountain or into a cloud or on an ark. Okay, now let's also look at what I think people overlook very often is the Table of Nations in First Chronicles and in Genesis. And the Tables of Nations is it records Noah and his 3 sons and all of their descendants. Well, all of a sudden we have very early in Genesis all of these nations, like the Rephaites and the Anakites, that do not descend out of the Table of Nations. So again, they either survived the flood or there was another recreation. And it can be either. I actually, at times I say it's one, and sometimes I say it's the other. Actually, the more I think about it and the more time goes, I think it's probably both. And there are so many nations that survived the flood, or at least somehow seemingly survived the flood, because their names got to come out of nowhere. So when we look at Seir in the Table of Nations, Seir's name enters as a people who, the descendants of Esau, son of Isaac, married into.
Baby, that's such an English meal, Stu. You guys love your stew, don't you?
These people come out of nowhere. And these are the Amalekites and the Horites. And there again is nothing recorded there in the Table of Nations or in the Old Testament to say how these people came about. And so when we look further into the Old Testament and we talk about the Amalekites, this is the beginning of another intermarriage and a hybrid population of giants being created that was totally anti descendants of Isaac and Jacob. And so we can also look at accounts of other peoples that aren't giants that somehow survived the flood, somehow, some way, because again, their names come out of nowhere and they are not part of the Table of Nations. And few of those ones, just to name an example, would be the Kenites and the Kenizzites. And of course, their history would say that they actually descended from Tubal-Cain. And so when we talk about the Kenizzites and the Kenites saying that they go back to descend back to Tubal-Cain, that's why we see this sort of mythos, this mythology that continues through religions and entertainment of people surviving the flood and descending back to Tubal-Cain. And probably the clearest one, the most recent one, was the recent movie about the flood and Noah, and where they insert Tubal-Cain being on the flood, on the ark, and surviving the flood. And that's a 100% Gnostic belief, where they believe that two of the sons for sure. In some accounts, they'll say Noah was Nephilim as well, but they believe that Tubal-Cain and Ham were the descendants of Tubal-Cain, and they were not the sons of Noah. And so again, you have to understand this is a different religion, a different belief system, but this belief system is everywhere and impacts all of our society. So we see those belief systems inserted in very strange and odd spots all the time. And when we talk about an ongoing mythos, I mean, I think so many people are probably familiar with the series on the History Channel with Ancient Aliens. And I watch Ancient Aliens all the time. I don't think there's a show that I missed, because I like the information that they bring, and I understand their perspective. I don't agree with their perspective, but what they're talking about is that the gods of ancient prehistory were actually aliens and not gods. And so there's not a whole lot of difference in terms of how they're trying to explain it, except that from a biblical perspective, these aliens were the fallen angels, very advanced beings, and they're saying they just weren't quite as advanced. They were just more advanced than people of prehistory. So the accounts that they bring in are extraordinarily relevant and pertinent, but for a Christian, just understand it from their perspective and then relate to it as to what Scripture says. And then when we talk about this mythos, we're talking about what everybody looks at as the little gray aliens. I think everybody recognizes that most aliens are these little grays. Well, when we talked about the four classes of fairies, there are three subsets, and in the one subset is called the subset of gnomes and goblins and sprites. And these were ugly little fairies. They weren't the pretty little ones with wings and everything that you see like in Disney and in Shakespeare and things like that. But these little ones, they had a section called the little grays, the gray neighbors, as they were known in Scotland. And so these little goblins were identical to the descriptions of the little grays that we know of today and in the sightings. And what's important about that is that these grays had flying machines, and they're offering technology and the ability to evolve, and they would kidnap people and return them. They would do DNA experimentation on them. They were looking to create hybrids. And in my book, I'll give an abduction by a fairy, by a gray neighbor, that you will find absolutely amazing. And if you didn't know it was an abduction by a fairy, a little people, you would think it was an alien abduction. So again, we see little people and these four classes of fairies. We see this all throughout history and all throughout our entertainment and all throughout mythology. And so if you go to the Ring of the Lords in Tolkien, you see these little people, a number of them, not all of them, because there was many kinds of little people. And what they're trying to tell us, or what they believe is that many of these little people and other beings survived. And if you look at the end of Tolkien, and it's sort of in Lord of the Rings, you have all of these beings going away on a boat. It's kind of has an imagery of an ark. So we take that probably at the time of the flood and the ark that these beings went away and that they survived today. Because what Tolkien says is now the age of humankind. And also in fairy mythology, just as in alien mythology, many people believe that these spaceships come through portals. And in the fairy mythology, whether it's a Shade, spelled Sidhe, or a fairy mound, or as in King Arthur, the Ladies of the Lake, they guarded these portals to the other world. And so you see this incredible parallel of imagery and mythology with the alien mythology in just so many ways to what we're talking about with fairies and with aliens. And of course, the fairy mythology goes back to the bloodlines and the descendants of giants. And the Tuatha De Danann, which are sort of the home race of the fairy race, were Nephilim, and they were the offspring of the fairies in Ireland in the Celtic mythology. When we look at the bloodlines that survive on these kingships of Nephilim, there is a dragon bloodline, which is the male bloodline, and there is a fairy bloodline, which is the matriarchy. And both of those, in both imagery and in importance in tracking the genealogy of the giants, is very, very important. And so that's why we see the fairy mythos and the dragon mythos, whether it's Dracula or snake imagery. These are all the imagery of the kingships and the bloodlines. And when we understand that, we start to understand why all of this is kept alive in so many aspects, whether it's literature, whether it is entertainment, whether it's science fiction. And it has been that way throughout our 6,000 years, because it's the imagery and the allegories of the mystical religion and the kingships and the bloodlines that have descended down through the generations. Okay, so let's start bringing this together a little bit more. And so what's the purpose of the other side, or the descendants of giants, and how and why do they want to enslave humankind? So let's again go first back to prehistory. So whether or not you're talking about the Greek Titan rebellion or the rebellion of the Nephilim against God, it's the same story. So in prehistory, we had the universal religion, we had giants, we had a rebellion against God. And so that brought about the first apocalypse. And in prehistory, they managed to enslave humankind. And so the creation of these giants, these snake-like beings, because they look just like the seraphim angels, their fathers in the first generations. They don't look like that today as a descendant or as a bloodline. But what Lucifer, what Satan was trying to do was take his revenge out, because all of this is connected back to the angelic rebellion. And so humankind is destined to be raised higher than angels. And this is not what the rebellious angels want. So this is all part of the angelic rebellion. And so when prophecy talks about rebellion, it will come about again in the end days, just as it did in the antediluvian period, where the first apocalypse came, and the second apocalypse will be by fire, not by water. And so when these forces and partnerships revived after the flood, we see the first rebellion taking place, and again to enslave humankind and bring on the universal mystical religion. We see this at Babel, where Nimrod is the Antichrist figure, and he usurps absolute control, and usurping of power is one of the sort of common traits to the Antichrist. And so he usurps power as king. They bring in the mystical religion. They force everybody to worship. They develop the 7 sacred sciences, and they're going to rebel against God. And if humankind actually succeeds in the rebellion against God, the dark angels win. And so they need to enslave us. And so God stepped in and confused the languages so that it wouldn't happen again until the time that's been ordained, which is the end time. And so we will see another rebellion, another stand against God, just as it occurred before the flood and at Babel. And so when we look shortly after the flood, these Nephilim, either from a recreation or surviving the flood, they once more usurped all of the main kingships after the flood. And so when we look at the Amalekite dynasty, the Egyptian dynasty, the Sumerian or the Akkadian or the Mesopotamian dynasties, the Mitanni dynasty, the Hittite dynasties, these are all Nephilim dynasties. And these bloodlines exist today. And they exist today in the royal families. And so most of the royal families, and they have genealogies to prove it. At least that's what they say. And they also have genealogists, and Lawrence Gardner has written many books about it as being a royal genealogist. They have the ability to take those genealogies all the way back into prehistory and all the way back to the giants. And so this bloodline is existing today, and that's why I call it the descendants of giants, or the bloodlines of the giants. And what these bloodlines are designed to do, and have been designed to do all throughout history, is to be kept pure to introduce the Antichrist. And so I will make a case in the book that the Antichrist of the end time will be a bloodline, or at least they will present him as a bloodline descending down from the giants. So now we're connecting these ancient bloodlines to the royal families around the world, and some of the most powerful families in the world. And so a question that a lot of people will have is so why aren't they giants today, and why don't they have the face of a serpent today? And so there's kind of 2 schools of thought. But I would encourage people, if they ever get a chance to go see a King Tut display, look for a statue of Akhenaten, and that would be circa 1400 BC. And if you look at that face, you're still seeing many facial features that are snake-like or paper-like in terms of the slanted eyes and the extended chin and the sloped forehead. And you can see through.
Looks like Barack Obama.
Prehistory, there's a significant amount of elongated skulls, and you see that in Egyptian history as well, and even as late as in Akhenaten. And try and keep the bloodlines as pure as they can. They still have to bring in other bloodlines, otherwise diseases and genetic things will come in. So they'll reintroduce bloodlines from.
Andrew, can you not please bring up the people that are watching that aren't joining the chat? Sort of discourages them from joining the chat if they see all that. So can you please not do that?
Related families that may have some human bloodlines, refreshing the bloodlines. And so there's been a sort of a long continual dilution over time, which is what most people believe as to why they come down to a size that of a normal human for the most part, and they don't have the same features as they did even 3,000 years ago, or maybe even 2,000 years ago. And then the other theory, which I'm not a fan of that particular one, but there is a large following out there that says that they have the ability to duplicate what a human looks like, and when they're in private, they look like a lizard. I think that's pure speculation. I don't think there's any proof of that. And just as there's a lot of talk about the bloodlines of the royals is an Rh negative bloodline, and that's the actual bloodline of the Nephilim. Again, there's nothing to really prove that other than They say that their belief is that's the belief of how the word Genesis came about. So you have the gene of Isis in Genesis, and so when you look at Isis, that was the wife of Osiris, and they were gods or fallen angels, and then they had Nephilim with the same names underneath, and so that's where they say the gene of Isis comes from Genesis. And so when you look at Isis, that was the wife of Osiris, and they were gods or fallen angels, and then they had Nephilim with the same names underneath, and so that's where they say the gene of Isis comes from, and that is still out there today. And in the end time, they're going to collect all of the people who have the gene of Isis, and those are the people that are going to rule the next world, not the average humankind. So they have no real need for humankind. Yes, this has taken place and how they've affected history, but when we bring that into the modern time, we have to look to what are they doing today. Well, if we look at the world today, it is being prepared for world government. It is being prepared for the end times, and this is all the work of the secret societies in the other religion and the bloodlines of the giant, because they want to bring about the end time. They want to bring about the Antichrist. They would prefer to do it not at the ordained time. They would prefer to do it any time other than the ordained time, but they will take the ordained time if they have to, and they will. So if we start looking at what's shaping our politics today and what's shaping the belief systems and the education systems and all the propaganda that is out there, it is all the same imagery and all of the same belief system and all of the same organizations that were there before. So if we go back to prehistory, we had world government in their belief system that came out of the Atlantean mythology. And Atlantis was the helm of world government. They're trying to create the new Atlantis. You wonder why we're just inundated with Atlantean mythology, where they were reigned over by 10 kings that were Nephilim kings in the antediluvian world. And we're inundated with it because they want to create the new Atlantis. And those are the exact new words that they will use for the new age. And Bacon, who is a very famous person from history and was a Rosicrucian in Freemasonry, he wrote a book called The New Atlantis. And what he's referring to is an age, a new golden age, where there is a world government that partners with a mystical religion and is reigned over by one leader. And that was the inspiration for the Royal Society, where all of our sciences come back today. And that the Royal Society was just created as an ability to advance sciences and the religion and to worship and honor the great architect of the universe, whom they call Lucifer. And so when we understand that all the education systems and all the, not surprising that we see developing today this concept of world government. It's an ancient concept. They want one government that they can rule over, just as they did in antediluvian times and at Babel, with one sun-worshipping Babel relationship, whereas it's known in the end times Babylon, and that they're going to have one king over there who will usurp kingship, which will be a modern Nimrod or a modern Nephilim. So they're working at bringing about world government. And if we look to Daniel and into Revelations, we now...
I put the TV on in the background about 10:30 when I go to sleep. And once I get to sleep, I'll wake up about midnight and I'll turn the telly off then. But I do try to go to sleep. Otherwise, I'm too hungover the next day.
Find that the Bible prophesizes 10 world empires. Or 10 empires, 10 kings. This is the Atlantean mythology manifested but predicted within the Bible. And so you see, again, the same story being told, the same end game, it's just who's going to win. And we see world government rising not through somebody like a Stalin or a Hitler trying to march across the world and conquer the world. We see it rising as a platform that the Antichrist will just be able to take control of. And so when we look at NAFTA or the EEC or whatever these trading blocks that are rising, look not for 10 specific nations. Look for 10 groups of nations, 10 spheres of influence, 10 regions that will unite and have one representative that goes and begins world government. But just as before, we have to have the universal religion, the mystical religion, as part of that partnership to make all of this happen. And that's why you see this war against Christianity, why it's going into the schools. Soon, everything about Christianity and the constitutions which were designed with this in mind will be used to persecute and sideline Christians, because Christians and monotheists are their only stumbling blocks.
Oh, Busby.
And they're progressively, and I use that word specifically, they're progressively working towards this through left-wing politics, which are the progressive.
At the end of the day, if Busby's not tired enough, he'll sprint up and down the hallway and into the lounge room. It's probably about 30 feet, and he sprints it and comes back. Gee, he's so funny.
And they've tried to create this many, many times. The last most
We call him Zoom.
recent one, and it's a perfect analogy, and I'll cover it off in the book, is the rise of the Third Reich. So you have an Antichrist figure, you have the mystical religion, you have the Third Reich, the 1,000-year reign that they're trying to recreate. You have the slaughter of the Jewish people, and then it would have also been the Christians thereafter. It is an exact Antichrist type prototype, just as Nimrod was. So again, what was before is going to be again. So they work at bringing about these things through specific secret societies. And you remember talking about Freemasonry and Masonry in ancient forms. Well, Nimrod was the first founder of the Masonic secret societies at Babel, and he wrote the first constitution, and then it was revitalized and reformatted the constitution at Heliopolis in Egypt. And that same organization, with many genitive organizations, has survived ever since. And we know that today as the Rosicrucians. We know that as the Freemasonry organizations. We know that as the Illuminati, and then all the different organizations that they have spun off. And that would be including the Gnostic religions, which they worship at their center, which created Theosophy, which also created New Age. We will recognize these groups as groups like the Bilderbergers, that they are taking all the new money and utilizing them to influence the world and meeting in secrecy, just as the Bohemian society that meets in California is, again, about new money, not the old money, not the true bloodlines. Understand there's a hierarchy involved here. So Freemasonry has lower levels, and then at the 33rd degree, they become illuminated and become an adept. And then from the Illuminati and from the enlightened people at the 33rd degree, the Illuminati drafts those adepts. And so that's the inner part. And then those people who have some bloodlines, some noble bloodlines, and who are able to continue to progress with enlightenment, they are drafted into the Rosicrucians. And above the Rosicrucians is the Council of 300. And the Council of 300 comes from the 13 families of the pure bloodlines. And then you go back to the 13 bloodlines. And within the upper tier group, they're going to keep 3 Antichrist figures ready to go at any time, raised from childhood, illuminated in levels that a Rosicrucian of a lower level wouldn't have, or Illuminati wouldn't have, but they've got an Antichrist figure ready to go all of the time. Some of the other organizations that these secret societies and families fund, people might remember the Skull and Bones. And so the Skull and Bones is just another one of these organizations, and what their main thing to do is out of Yale in particular, they're going to draft in the pseudo blue bloods from the United States. And then when we talk about pseudo blue bloods, that's again the bloodlines. It's just not as pure as the ones that came across from Europe.
Yeah, I agree with that, baby. Little dogs are not as right.
Intermarry, but the people being drafted into the Skull and Bones, they're the people going into all of these government organizations to control governments. And so most of them go into an organization called the CFR first. And that's the Council of Foreign Relations. So if you look at any political shows and interviews, they're going to bring on these advisors and people when they're talking about politics, and many of them are going to come from the CFR. This is from that organization, and it's their job.
Diane, I wonder what it means, an animal tipping point. What does that mean?
To bring about world government. And there's not just the CFR that's an organization. You have the Bilderbergers, and they were doing the same thing, only from a European perspective. And that organization, their end product was the EEC. And we talked about that earlier as one of those rising empires, just as we look at NAFTA as part of a North American entity that's going to form into these 10 world governments. And then there's another organization that people might be familiar with, is the Trilateral Organization. And they were created for Europe, United States, and Japan, the three biggest economies in the 70s, to again find a way to bring the world together as one government. That's their charter. There's another interesting group, and there's many of these webs that are working. The Leviathan of this organization is so immense, people can't imagine it. I can't imagine it. It's just everywhere. But there's one that sort of brings us full circle, is an organization called the Club of Rome. And the Club of Rome is an organization that was organized to bring about world government with, you guessed it, 10 empires, 10 blocks of countries. And they were organized in the late 60s and the early 70s. So this organization is above the Bilderbergers and is getting very close to the Council of 300 with its members. So very, very powerful. They split into several different groups. And so Freemasonry through Scotland, where it originated and where some of the surviving Templars went, was one aspect of it. And that was more or less the political aspect. And it grew with the expansion of the British Empire and with the French Empire. And so they also needed to replace the banking arm. Well, there was a family in Germany who was working for some of the German bloodlines, was brought in to be the bankers, and that was the Bauer family. And then when they grew rich and powerful and became the banking arm of the agenda of these bloodlines and organizations, they moved to England, to London, and they felt they should change their name. And coincidentally, most people will be familiar with the family called the Rothschilds. That's who the Bauer family is, and they were created to fund these organizations. Then the Rothschilds, they drafted many families in the United States and made them wealthy, and they're loyal to the Rothschilds today. So if we talk about the Carnegies, or if we talk about the Warburgs, or if we talk about J.P. Morgan, and in particular the Rockefellers, all of these families were funded by the Rothschilds, and they're totally loyal today. And these are sort of that heart of that pseudo blue bloodline that goes back to the Rothschilds, who aren't as pure as the 13 families, because this was a less pure line that was brought in after the demise of the Templars. But they were the banking arm. Now, the profits from the banks, let me back up a step first. Note that all the reserve banks in the world are owned by the banks. They're not government owned. And the Rothschilds own most of the banks, and the rest of the banks that are the ownership of the reserve banks were funded and created by the Rothschilds to act as their stable agents. Now, the profits that the banking industry makes, not in all countries, but particularly in the US, they can move their profits to trusts and not be taxed on it. And so you'll have the Rockefeller Trust and the Morgan Trust, and there's just a...
Diane, I'll play that tomorrow. Goes for an hour and a half. Perfect.
Incredible amount of these trusts. These trust organizations are used to sponsor their concepts, their agenda, their ideas, bring about the acceptability of world government, to affect policy and teaching in schools, whatever they want on the agenda, that's what they're funded to do. And we see that happen throughout our universities, throughout our schools today, throughout what happens in the media, it's all working from this tax-free money coming from the banks. Look in behind any organization, just look at the symbology. So if you've got anything that has a, let's say for an example, derivative of Lucifer, whether it's Lucent or anything like that, and there used to be a company called Lucent Technologies that had a red dragon as their icon, and their address was 666 on a street in New York. So they are very arrogant, but people don't look. But you have to understand the language that they're talking about. And so what they're really trying to do is just sort of get people used to the concept so that this isn't such a big surprise, so that when world government comes about, you're ready for it. When socialism, when they want to create a socialist government, you're used to it because you've seen these ideologies all throughout. That Christianity isn't a religion that you can trust in, that the New Testament isn't accurate, the Old Testament isn't accurate. These are all the doctrines of what they're trying to do. And when you see the imageries, whether it's with the alien mythos, look for the religion that's in the alien mythos. It's mysticism. It's Eastern mysticism. If it's evolution being taught in school, understand that comes out of Eastern mysticism. It's a mystical concept. It's not about that you just live and die. It's part of recreation, that your spirit will evolve over time to become a god. So it's a different spin, a different belief system into godhood, just as Eden, the big doctrine out of Eden is eat from the tree of good and evil so you can be like God. The whole doctrine is that they're going to try and deceive us into that we believe that we can rebel against what they would call the evil God and follow the good God, which they believe is Lucifer.
You know what? The only thing you should be reducing in the kitchen is your stress. With every plate's deliciously simple meal kits, dinner's ready in as little as 15 minutes.
They always look like airplane food. I can't stand that type of food.
Every plate. Get stuck in.
Right now, get the 1-ton Deliver 7 with a free option pack, including dual sliding door.
Now I am going to turn things over to my brother Gary Wayne, and we are going to get started. Gary, I turn it over to you, my friend.
There's going to be, I'm sure, going to be some surprising things that we talk about and some questions that the audience is going to want to know about. And if there's a chat room there that you're getting questions, certainly feel free to, pop in the audience questions. So I think the Jesuits is one of those really interesting stories that needs to be learned. And for people who aren't familiar with my book, I did not put the Jesuits into the book. And I didn't include them for a reason, because it's a very divisive issue. It's a fairly large issue, and I didn't want to distract from the overall theme. But what I did do is I put in all of the basis for the building into who creates the Jesuit orders. And so we need to understand that sort of from that kind of beginning. And I promise, for people who want.
Diane, David Icke got interviewed by Redacted recently. I was actually going to show it, but I forgot about it because that was about 2 weeks ago.
Information on the Jesuits is that it will be in the sequel. I will put a section in there. I won't do like a whole book on Jesuits, but I'll connect it in terms of how it connects from prehistory to prophecy.
Wow.
for the new book that's going to be coming out. So we need to understand that the Jesuits are a Masonic organization. And when I'm talking about Masonic, it's a little bit more from an ancient basis, even though they're a more recent contemporary organization like the Illuminati or like the Freemasons or like the Rosicrucians, but kind of sort of similar to that. One of those incredibly important organizations that are created after the fall of the Knights Templar. who are the modern wedge to all of the secret societies we understand today. And it was a very centralized organizational structure. I mean, they were the royal masons from ancient times. They were founded by royal bloodlines, and the ones that weren't physically, notably as being the sons of kings, as in de Payon and de Bouillon and Anjou from the Lorraine region, which is another interesting name as you come down with the double cross of Lorraine and the Habsburg Lorraine dynasty. And so what's interesting is that, you know, the other doctrine that they were working on and is called the United Kingdom. Be wary of that term, the United Kingdom of the world, because they want to establish that so that their grand monarch, as they talk about him in the secret societies, would be the ruler of the world and sitting on the throne in Jerusalem. This is the dragon Messiah. This is the elven bloodline of the Messianic dragon that they've been plotting to put there forever. And anything that is associated with Templarism is the antithesis of Christianity as it's meant to be, and anything that's written in the Bible. And we're told over and over and over and over not to swear oaths, and that you will be held accountable for those oaths. If you swear that oath, then you had better fulfill it, because God will hold you accountable for it. But we're advised not to, over and over and over. And yet, this is based on an oath-based system in the mystical religions, and that all goes back to the oath sworn on Mount Hermon before the flood, and then again after the flood. And it's the oath of the watchers to carry it out to the end. The oath of Harum Anathema. No matter what the consequences, no matter what would happen to them, they were going to create a race to lead humanity into destruction.
Wow.
And that's their purpose. So the purpose of the Templars is to recreate the scenario to destroy humanity. And they do that through creating their worldwide hegemony that we will understand with the coming end time and all the different horrors that you see in prophecy, particularly against humans and particularly in a more spiteful way against anybody who stands against them, like monotheists, Christians. They will express that blood hatred, just as the Amalekites and the giants swore oaths to wipe Israel from the face of the earth in the time of the age of Israel and its creation and throughout its history.
That they are using the book of Revelation as a playbook for the other side.
Yeah, and we see that being fulfilled. And when I talked about banking, for an example, and the Rothschilds were set up as bankers outside the church after the fall of the Templars. The Templars were the largest banking organization that was ever created to that time, and created all the platforms for modern banking as we understand it today. So they needed to replace it both inside and outside the church. And the Rothschilds were the sponsors of the whole Zionist movement. And the iconology that they use with the Star of David comes in at the same time to put Israel back into the land of the covenant so that they could bring forward the end time rendezvous with destiny that they want to have. And the Rothschilds were originally named the Bauer family, were funded by the secret societies and the bloodlines to become that banking organizational structure. And so we ought not to look at that Israel being in the land of the covenant isn't the fulfillment of prophecy, because it is, because we know Israel, or the southern kingdom more accurately, is in the covenant land in the time of the Ezekiel war in 38 and 39, and that they're in control of Jerusalem in times of the signing of the 7-year covenant, Daniel 9:27, and permitted to do the sacrifice, and in control of Jerusalem as the epicenter for those first 3.5 years until they flee to the wilderness, as talked about in the book of Revelation and in the 4 Gospels. So what we're not told,
with that guy I invited in, the one that we had the band, I asked him to come on. I said, "Have you got any questions? I'm pretty sure my guys will help you out." So he comes on, and what's he do? He starts attacking me. Oh, I couldn't believe it. I was so embarrassed for him.
Biblically in eschatology is how that remnant shows up for the end time. And again, this is all happening through free choice. And so this has been made available to bring a scenario for the end time because of the polytheists. They understand end time prophecy as well. They have a different view on the outcome, but they know that they have to have Israel in place if they're going to bring about the end time. And so I think that was their gambit.
Yeah.
But we should not look poorly on that, whether or not all the people are Jewish root or not. What we do need to know is that they need to be in the covenant land and in control of Jerusalem in the end time. And then once they're there, we apply the prophecies that we've been provided throughout the Old and New Testament.
Yeah. I've got a friend.
Babe, I've been talking on the phone with him the last week or so because he got in touch. Because sometimes I don't hear from him for about 12 months. And what he's done when he's taken over, when he came in here, he just started off asking questions, trying to put me on show. And I don't understand why. He just can't help himself. When I talk to him on the phone, he tells me how all his neighbours are dirty on him and things like that. Yeah, because you act like an arsehole.
Who I actually met through.
I've got to ring him later on and tell him that and tell him not to ring again.
I met him through YouTube, him watching my YouTube videos and commenting on them, and then we eventually started emailing and then talking through Facebook Messenger because it's got the video calls and whatnot. But his family, he's what you would consider a Palestinian Jew. He didn't come from Europe. But
Diane, I had to teach him how to look on chat, how to get a chat going, and how to look up YouTube. He didn't know even how to look up live streams.
But his family has literally been there for 3,000 years. Israel, of course, became a nation in 48, but Jews have, they've been there, throughout history, just not as, I get.
Yeah, Andrew, it wasn't fair, mate. I've helped him out a lot with Christ. Like, he's pretty lost, and he thinks he's in the right, but he fights with his neighbours. He beat up the local priest, apparently. This is from him. And when I try to correct him and say, well, look, that's not how we do it, he'll just start screaming and shouting. So he's just a goat. I try my best.
It's a recognized nation by the rest of the world, yeah.
Yeah, and so I guess if you look at the Knights Templar, they were the most powerful military organization at that time, and this organization moves back to Europe, and it changes the whole trajectory in so many different ways of the West, and that this is an organizational structure that's connected to Sufism and who has a similar goal and agenda. Now, those are different bloodlines.
Andrew, we call shanks shivs. In Australian prisons, they're called shivs, not shanks.
And we should also understand then that there will be Mahdi's, as they call them in Israel. One Shia, who knows, there might be the Sufi one as well, and they're going to do battle in the end time. One of the things that most people don't realize is that not only were they the most powerful military organization, the most powerful financial organization, but they were provided in a series of papal bulls additional powers and autonomy, to the point where Pope Gregory, he passed a bull that didn't permit any oversight of the Knights Templar by any bishops within the Roman Church, and that they were able to appoint their own priests. They had their own religion within the religion and were given the power to do so by the popes. And
Wow.
they were a complete law unto themselves. And so they were doing all sorts of different things in terms of intrigue.
Didn't the King of France kill the Masonic, the Mason mob? Didn't he kill them? The Templars, didn't a French king kill the Templars?
That was not sitting well with the church or with a number of the kings. But there was you could make a long list as to why you would want to get rid of them, but they were so powerful. So you had to have one of the more powerful kings along with the Pope to get together to be able to bring them down, but they still didn't make them completely disappear. That's how powerful they were. And they're that powerful because they're all bloodlines. So they come with power. And so, you know, even when the Jesuits were dismantled in the 1800s, they found protection in Prussia and in Eastern Europe. And I mean, the early 1800s when they were taken down, and they were easily reassembled in the 1800s with the resurgence of the Mary apparitions, which is really directly connected to the Jesuits as well, from their organization beginnings, because the organization was just underground, awaiting an opportunity to come back. And in this, it was the Pope who was in France, imprisoned by the King of France, who decides he's going to start bringing back the Templars, because they're the Jesuits, because
hey, it was good to see you.
Because he needs protection from.
I don't know why I'm yelling.
So there's always this intrigue that's going on throughout our history, and one might expect that they're going to play a role in the end time, and particularly with a modern version as the Jesuits. Understanding we have a Jesuit place there. Yeah. So. And those trunk organizations are the rebuttal to the taking down of the centralized Knights Templars. So Freemasonry is created, and they have a specific agenda that has to do with the army controlling the military and politics. The Illuminati is created to destroy Christianity and work on world government. And they work through the Leviathan reach of the lodges of Freemasonry as it's set up around the world to do so. Then you have the Rosicrucians, which controls all the literature, the media, and the entertainment.
That's who we suspect Paul Begley is, because he's got that Masonic ring.
And is the source to the modern versions of polytheism that we saw come downstream in Gnosticism, Theosophy, and New Age, and that they are controlling those and overseeing those other two orders below that are reporting up to the Rosicrucians, up to the Committee of 300, that dominates all of the banking, that dominates so many organizations, whether it's World Bank, whether or not it's the International Monetary Fund, whether or not it's World Trade, whether or not it's the Davos community, on and on and on, is controlled by the Committee of 300, because money is the source of their power. And if people think that Bill Gates or Bezos or Musk are the real wealth, that's a drop in the bucket. And the books wealth that is stored in Switzerland is astronomical. We have no idea how large that wealth is. Well, I was trying to do research on it when I was writing book one, and in the early 2000s, I was given some numbers. They're all over the net, but the consistent number range at that time of off the books wealth of the Europeans was 300 to 500 trillion. And so now we're over 20 years later. You can only imagine what that wealth would be.
500 trillion. Wow.
And that's how they stay in power. So they make sure that this world is run through the oligopolies, and they're moving to a more formalized oligopoly for the end time. And it's just part of that organizational structure, but it's the money. And then all of that money in that organization that's in the Committee of 300 that report into that, they're reporting up to, the 33 families and the 13 families in the West. But understand, there are other bloodlines around the world, and they have their organizational structures as well.
And people who say to me that digital currency will take away all of the embezzlement and the ability to control things via printing money, I just laugh because it will make it easier. I mean, it literally goes from having to print paper to just typing in a number.
Yeah, it moves on steroids on how they can manipulate it. And you won't see that digital cryptocurrency come until they get some of the AI technology up to speed, which is why Davos received the instructions that until you get better AI out there, we can't move forward. And they've had a big push on that this year. They need to have control over the daemon algorithms, because if you combine digital currency, which fits in perfectly.
Well, Trump's put in 500 billion. We know that, to the AI development. We know that.
With quantum mechanics and quantum computing and AI, you have the ability to decode and crack anything, even in cryptocurrency, from other dimensions. And so you need an advancement of these invisible algorithms that they call daemons. Invisible as in the invisible ones that are like they be in the background. The invisible ones are the true invisible ones of the spirit realm who govern this world from the council of the gods. But they want to be able to control things from behind the algorithms with these streams that their money, their information, their technology can't be cracked by anybody. And so they're still working on all of that before they bring in that digital currency. And they also have the ability to convert that into nothing and bring out all of their gold, because they've got all the gold that's been rounded up over the millennia stored away as well. That they'll just reassert a new type of gold standard when everything collapses.
There sure ain't none in the Federal Reserve or Fort Knox.
Yeah, it went somewhere, didn't it?
Yeah. Now, what is that? I know it's a different subject, but that you were just talking about, the algorithm, the invisible, I can't pronounce the word you use, but I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's the Greek word daemon. And
so that's the word for demon.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's they do everything in plain sight. That's the term that they like to use for those invisible algorithms that control the outcomes behind the scenes. And so they need to get more secure and better at that, so that they can absolutely control and manipulate everything and not, suffer some sort of cyber attack themselves. So I know that's probably not the right word at that level of technology, but whatever the word is for that, they're still working on that. So they've tested the cryptocurrency.
Okay, Di will do.
It's not secure enough for the real money in this world. So they'll be working on, as we've seen with the instructions, are working to get that in place. And, even when you see Google AI, Elon Musk's, and I like Elon Musk a lot, but I'm also very, very careful, because there's white hats and black hats, but they all worship the same pantheon. He's creating AI because he thinks the Google AI is evil, and his is going to be good AI. I have to say, even though I like Musk a lot, there's no such thing as good AI.
Yeah, I think he's got a very likable personality for sure, and I don't dislike him or anyone else. And I think he probably has good intentions for, the things that he does with things like the counter AI, if you could call it that, but like his brain interface technology to try to make humans be able to compete with AI. But regardless of his intentions, like you said, there's no such thing as a good AI, and transhumanism isn't good either. I mean, even if it only led to a Ready Player One type world and there were no end times implications, it still wouldn't be good.
Yeah, none of it leads to any good outcomes. But we're racing in that direction, and I think it's because of the same motivation that there was to create the nation of Israel, is they want to get.
It's not from YouTube. I can't share it. It's like that UK Ultra stuff you sent me last week. But you can't share it unless I'm on Instagram, and I'm not. And I'm not sure if Lynn is.
Things in place for the end time.
But if you know it's YouTube headline, I can look it up.
They want to bring that about.
Absolutely. A lot of people just aren't aware of just how much was done and had to happen for the nation state of Israel to be brought into being. Like World War One was all but over before it really began, before the Rothschilds blackmailed Europe into the Balfour deal and which got America into the war and got it started for real. And it's just
Australian soldiers conquered Jerusalem in World War One. In 1917, we marched into Jerusalem with Colonel Allenby, I think it was, a pommy colonel. Might have been a major. But we're the first Western country in fighting for them.
Believe by any means that the Zionists or the Rothschilds are godly in the sense of being polytheistic, or that they are even trying to do the right thing. But I agree with you to some extent that it is absolutely prophetic. God chooses how prophecy is fulfilled. Man may think that he's controlling things, but God just looks and laughs. And
and no matter how the spirits forces around the world try, they cannot bring about the end time before the ordained time.
Correct.
But there is an ordained time, and they are working to bring it about. And I think it's also one of the confusions that goes into understanding some end time prophecy, particularly with the seal and the trumpet judgments. Those are not brought by God. They're brought by those who run this world. And they're contrived. But they're trying to bring about their dragon Messiah. And they're going to need an Armageddon-like war for his credentials. So we need to understand that the things that happen in this world happen because it's permitted to happen through free choice for a certain period of time. And there is a time that only God knows when Jesus is going to return, even though we're told to watch and to understand the seasons. But this world and all the horrible things happening in it has nothing to do with God. He has given us the gift of life. He has given us the opportunity to have our names in the book of life and to choose to continue forever or not, and to have our names left in the book of life or blotted out.
I just told her on Messenger that we're live.
Our choice. All the things that have happened that are evil in this world happens through that free choice. and it's not the way God.
She sends me memes all day, so I am in touch with Lynn rather closely.
Would like to see things played out, but he's greater than free choice. That he's Alpha Omega. So,
Absolutely.
And so there is a specific time, and I think we are indeed in the fig tree generation, and we need to get very clear-eyed about what happened, what is, and what's going to come, and understand that we're going to get a lot of disinformation, misinformation, propaganda, persecution, cancellation, all the things that we see going on. It's only going to get stronger and worse as they bring about this dystopian new world order, the new Atlantis that they say they want to bring about. But that has to happen. It's going to continue to move forward. We can push it back with, more God worship and more evangelization of people to follow God. But at the end of the day, there's a godless generation that is reserved. There's a fig tree generation that is reserved. There is the days of Noah, which can also be understood as a generation, as you take that back to its Greek and its Hebrew meanings as generation. There is that generation where all of these things that Jesus has predicted will be fulfilled. So it will come.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that the preterists misunderstand when they see Jesus say, this generation, they think, and they use that passage constantly, that he was talking about that specific generation. So when the temple was destroyed, then everything was fulfilled. But, it's like you said, he was talking about the fig tree generation.
Yeah, that's right. But they ignore inconvenient passages.
Absolutely.
And the other thing that is really interesting is that even where they're talking about all things are being fulfilled, they're going against what Daniel 9 says, that there's 1 week of years when all vision and prophecy is going to be fulfilled. And Jesus comes in to rule. And that week has not happened yet. And it's just amazing that they like to separate that out. And that happens in the end time. The Hebrew word ketz, Daniel 9:26 used twice. And that when they're talking about this little season that is supposed to last, and I've heard so many different versions of it. And again, people can believe what they want to believe, but you shouldn't have to reinvent what the Bible says, and you should not have to leave out inconvenient passages. So they say this little season is something like, some people say up to almost 2,000 years, probably starting from the time of the destruction of.
It's 3.5 years, isn't it?
Of Jerusalem. Some people say it's only 300 years. They have a different time frame on it because there's no scriptural reference that they're basing it on. And that they say the little season is when Satan has been let out and he's ruling the world.
Good night, Phil. God bless, mate.
And that's why there isn't a memory of anything, except that's not possible, because when you look at Revelation 20, Jesus and the saints are still ruling in Jerusalem. There's not this rule of Satan that's talked about. He's out to gather an army. And even the Armageddon army takes less than a year to be gathered, which Satan is involved on. So when we look at that word, the little season, they're taking it right out of its context.
And that comes after Armageddon anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right. So many people are believing that we are in the little season that's in between the reign of Christ and when Satan is finally thrown in the lake of fire for eternity. There's really so much evidence to the contrary just in the scriptures. Before Jesus was ever crucified, he said that Satan was the god of this world. When he was tempted by Satan, when Satan said all of these kingdoms, took him up on the high mountain, that all of these kingdoms have been given unto me, and I can give them to whoever I want. Jesus didn't say, you liar. He quoted scripture to him.
They're Satan's kingdoms until they're not, which is at the end of the end time, and then he's released. He's going to try and take his kingdom back. And so this little season, when you take that back to the Greek, That's little as in micros. Literally means small, short, little. And chronos, which means season. And that we get one other application for little season, micros chronos, and that happens in Revelation 6, where they're told the people waiting, the ones with the white robes are waiting before the throne, are told to wait for a little season. So the biblical application, the furthest you could stretch that is 3.5 years. Season could also be understood as just a season.
Okay, guys, I didn't realise we'd already seen that yesterday. Because he throws so much stuff up there, went over my head that I'd already done it. So let's go to Dave. Oh, there's bloody in it. It's bloody and it hasn't loaded. Come on, load. Skip. Okay, there we go.
We got aliens. We got former presidents talking about those. We got AI running amok with these new movies. We got some weird stuff going on with lunar eclipses. Strange events anticipated for decades has begun. We'll get into that. We got another weird thing that relates to it, talking about the apocalypse. Mainstream media is talking about the apocalypse.
Yeah, Diane, the Playboy house had tunnels, and it was a honey trap. It was run by Mossad. Could have been a CIA, but it's one of them.
Yeah, we'll get into that as well, of course. We got people being arrested in other countries while America hasn't done jack anything, although our president just changed his tune, by the way, which is a good thing. He's now all for getting the files out. When he was fighting against it for 4 months there, apparently that strategy did not work. Whoever's advising him needs to be fired at this moment. We got people on Joe Rogan, screenwriters for movies that are very famous, telling it just like we were saying back years ago. We'll get into that as well. We got a lot more. We got tons. Let's just get going here. Let's start with this AI movies. I showed a couple clips. I showed a Kanye West, apparently viral video of a music video in Chinese or something that went viral in China. Now you got these. You got them making all different types of clips showing just how good AI has become. They make these in literally minutes.
Stand down.
I'm sorry.
Do you see the stuff I pick up in the Avengers series, guys?
Oh, hell no. He killed like a bajillion people.
They're like, it's supposed to be the one that taught Bruce Lee, right? I forgot what his name is. The guy, I mean, that's the movie he's playing in. I can't remember what it's called, though. At any rate, you get the idea. So, of course, obviously, they can make this in minutes now. I mean, literal minutes. Make these clips. They look very good, considering how little time it takes. And some are wondering, what is our future as a result of these AI developments? We have, I think, some good hope in the process, because we're now seeing a lot of these jobs that were lost to AI, about half of them are coming back because they realized AI didn't solve all the problems. And so I was thinking this would be the case. So right now the AI market is teetering on essentially bankruptcy, because they have like a circular market. They're running out of money. They're running running on fumes currently. They're buying from each other via buying up investments in OpenAI buying their microchips. It's kind of rubbing my back, I rub yours kind of thing going on. And I think it's kind of like the internet.com bubble. It's going to pop very soon here. And so that's going to actually lead to a lot of this AI going to the wayside for at least a while. Although you can see it just keeps growing by leaps and bounds. Then you got this here. Former President Barack Obama talking about aliens are real. He says they are real. On this podcast here.
he kept the volunteering for anal probes with the angel falling with ETs. He kept volunteering for anal probes, so they had to sack him.
Just came out. Check this out.
Couple questions here. Are aliens real?
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in what is it?
Area 51.
Area 51. There's no underground facility, unless there's this enormous conspiracy, and they hid it from the president of the United States.
What was the first question?
There's enormous conspiracy with the atomic bomb as well. Operation Manhattan, I think they called it. They kept most of the government in the dark.
You wanted answered when you became president.
Where are the aliens?
Where are the aliens? Couple questions here.
Okay. Well, maybe that was his first question. I don't know. But obviously, he says there are aliens. We now have, obviously, a lot of different recent. They had that disclosure documentary came out. We've had a number of other people in the government themselves talking about aliens being real. We've had various, like what was it, a year ago, we had a committee on that whole thing where they're presenting evidence of aliens existing. Obviously, they do exist, but what are they? That's the question. Are they from another planet? Are they interdimensional beings, as many are postulating? Are they spiritual in nature? Are they just simply fallen angels, or in some cases, angels? Is this just this alien technology actually angelic technology? Or is it, so some are wondering if it's a complete ruse. Is it to make us believe there are these beings from another planet that are going to come here and show us how we're wrong about everything? We need to understand the truth of nature of the entire universe. Or is it just a ruse to deceive us? Because, of course, they tried to separate us from religion, as you've seen over the last so many decades. But now, with these files that came out, the Epstein files, it seems like the whole gig is up. Everyone can see through this. They see that they were literally worshiping, of course, demons. Jeffrey with his bank account called Baal, which is literally the false god they were worshiping in the Old Testament thousands of years ago. That's kind of weird. Has a little weird temple thing on the top of the highest point on his island, which is exactly what they did in the Old Testament times when they were disobeying God. They would build their high places where they would communicate and worship false gods. And this would be sort of the portal to where they could communicate with them or be with them. And that was what the Tower of Babel was all about as well, is they were trying to build a mountain, a man-made mountain, and put a portal on top of it to communicate or go to the gods. So it's just kind of interesting that they're literally doing the same thing they're doing thousands of years ago today. You have here Stefan Burns saying that we've entered into a new time with regards to all the stuff happening, a total lunar eclipse happening on March 3rd. He's talking about how it lines with a number of other things. Let's play this here really quick. This is kind of interesting. Check this out.
Hey everyone, geophysicist Stefan Burns here. We have a big energy wave that is currently rolling in, and that's solar eclipse on the 17th of February, which will be viewable as a ring of fire from East Africa down to Antarctica. And on the same day, we enter into the year
That's tomorrow for me.
of the fire horse. Just a few days later, we have the great conjunction between Saturn and Neptune, a once in 36-year event approximately, but this one is very special because it occurs exactly at the spring equinox point in our tropical local reference frame. And also we have Pluto and Uranus in harmonic aspects to Saturn and Neptune with 60 degrees.
That's really interesting. So, of course, I think these things are not coincidental. We know with the Revelation 12 sign, you had the wandering stars align, or the planets, as he's talking about here. He's talking about these planets all aligning into a certain shape. We saw with the Revelation 12 sign, them all align in a straight line. And when that occurred, the King of Kings was born back 2,000 years ago on that day. This goes back to the whole thing about following the star. It came from the east, as you see in the scriptures. But actually, there was literally, what was it? All the planets were aligned on his day. And so these things actually are very important. When all these things happen in such intricate detail, and at the exact same time, it usually indicates something big is about ready to happen. All right.
Degree angles, and those two planets together being in a 120-degree trine. So that is quite rare, very powerful signature. And following after that, we have a lunar eclipse that will be visible from North America. Well, there's a bunch of other mundane factors, you could call them.
So that's kind of interesting. So we have a lunar eclipse also coming up. So you have those planets aligning, which usually indicates something very big is going to happen. Just like we had back in 2017, we had it also in 2024, but we had and it was extremely rare. So you have it 2,000 years ago at the birth of the King of Kings. You had it exactly aligned the same way in 2017, September, I think it was 23rd. And then it almost aligned the same way in 2024 in September as well, except for there was a birth. There was an asteroid that went through in the area where Virgo would have been giving birth. Okay. So some are wondering if it's giving birth to something new, a new era. He talks about us entering into the year, what was it he said back here? Year of the fire horse or something like that? Let's hear what he said here.
To Antarctica, and on the same day we enter into the year of the fire horse.
So that's kind of interesting. What does the year of the fire horse mean? I don't know. It's kind of interesting though. Anyway, you get the idea. Obviously something is going to happen sooner. We now have our president on board with releasing these files. So it makes you wonder. So now that he just transitioned, it literally happened.
I saw footage, and this is before AI, probably about 6 months ago, where there was a toddler's pageant going on, and Tom Hanks was holding his arms out saying, "You're such a sexy baby. Look how sexy you are." I swear, guys, I don't make things up. I saw him do that. I already knew his history because Ricky Gervais pointed out what he's like.
I think today, was it today or yesterday? I covered over on my other channel with this clip of Thomas Massey talking about it, and he goes into detail. He was asked specifically why he thinks the president has been flipping and now changed his mind again. They were asking him, why is the president doing this? Why was he first for releasing the files? Then he was for 4 months against it, and then now he's flipped again to be for releasing them again. Why? And he answered the question, and his answer is exactly what I speculated it was on my channel numerous times. Matter of fact, I'll just play it right here. Check this out.
Release the files. And if they're serious about it, they should release them right now. It's that simple.
Why do you think he is working so hard not to get them released for so many months? What do you think the real reason is?
These files implicate billionaires and friends of his and political donors that he's trying to protect. And Epstein also had close ties to our own intelligence agencies in Israel.
This is what I was saying. I was saying it was because he had friends. The only reason that he has been stalling on this is because he got bad advice from his advisor. So our president at first wanted to release these files. Then he found out just how many of his donors and friends are in it. And he was like, maybe he just thought it was a few people that were going to the island. And then he found out, oh shit, it's everybody. Every freaking person went there practically. Even my friends went there and I didn't even know it. My business partners, my donors went there. Oh shit, what do I do? He's got all these advisors around. Oh, you should just don't release them. Don't release them. And and you know why they got into his ear? Let me tell you why. My researcher, he's really good at analyzing personalities, and he's mapped out Trump's personality, and he's susceptible to one thing. If you compliment him and agree with him,
Yep.
You're going to get his ear very easily.
Yep.
And you can see that when you watch some of these interviews with people around him just laughing whenever he says a joke or just agreeing with him instantaneously. This is like stroking his ego, and he'll listen to anything those people will say. So he gets these advisors around him that stroke his ego, laugh at everything he says, agree with him on everything, but then they give him suggestions. Well, you should do this, you should do that. And they give him shitty advice. They give him very bad advice. Don't release the files because your friends will be implicated in it. Just let it, fizzle out, and we'll deal with these bad guys another way, right? Or whatever they said to him. I don't know what the hell they said to him. But for a long time, for months, He went along with this plan for 4 months. He goes here and says how he just switched.
So what do you think this is all about for President Trump? First, he was blocking this, pushing Republicans to block this for so long. Now he's reversing course, and he has the power to release the full files anyway.
So you can see there, right there, it said that he was first blocking it. Now he wants to go forward with it. And then he asked him, why is this happening? And I just told you the reason why. But anyway, you get the idea. So we got a lot more to get into. Actually, we got a ton more to get into. We're just getting started. Actually, I didn't even get into that yet. We got to get into. So I was talking about all these. We showed Stefan Burns' video here. All these alignments happening with these planets. Again, that's actually a really big deal when that happens. You've heard the phrase, "Did the stars align for you?" Right? And when they say that, they mean the wandering stars. The wandering stars are the planets. Did the planets align for you? Right? So we'll get into what now the media is saying, which is really weird. It ties into that. But first, I want to mention food supply 25-year shelf life. Link is in the description. 4 weeks for free. You can go get it for free right now. I don't know if you have to pay shipping or handling. I don't know. But it's free other than shipping and handling, maybe. But check it out. Link is in the description. Also, they have other options. They actually got multiple things on the page here. They got this massive package here for $3,000. Includes like a bazillion things, as you can tell here. What is all this stuff? Like a furnace thing. They got like a solar generator, just like distilled water thing. They got a bunch of food supply, obviously. And they got a bunch of other stuff in here as well. They got the Grid Doctor alone. Oh wow, that thing. Oh okay. Oh no. Okay, so it's the Grid Doctor plus all these things. Okay, that's what's going on. It's the same package. All right. Yeah, but then they also have this down here where you can get it for the food alone for free.
Yeah, Di, I disagree that Trump was protecting his mates. I don't believe that at all. Trump must be in them for them to hide it like that. More than he is. I know he's photographed with rich people, but everyone, that's what he hangs around, the rich people. But yeah, he wouldn't cop all the blame and not release to keep them safe. He wouldn't do that. It'd be a stupid move as a person and a stupider move as a president.
Go check it out. Link is in the description. That's the book here, The Lost Ways. Your great-grandfather lived without electricity. You never know what's next. Always wise to be prepared for whatever that might be. You've seen the strange things going on around us over the last few years. With these files coming out, our president just flipped, saying he's going to release them. He got so many people in these files, you think they're going to just like, oh, shucks, you got me. I'm going to jail now. Or you think they're going to do something?
Take a look inside Haagen-Dazs, made of comps where only the best will do. Combining rich cream, luscious buttery caramel with crunchy brittle pieces. Et voila, the ice cream of ice creams.
Come on, ads.
What Service Titan has brought here to Sydney, Australia is so incredible. And it's just showing the world that, you know what, trades up.
I think they're going to do some crazy stuff this year. Okay, I thought it was going to be last year. It looks like it's going to be this year. I was thinking last year this was all going to come out and be over with. Apparently not. It got dragged on into this year. Still dealing with these files. Still haven't really got it released fully properly yet. No one fully prosecuted at all. We've only had a few. We've had like a handful of people, maybe 6 to 12 people get in trouble for things that we want to get in trouble, but they didn't really. They're like kind of like small crimes, not these big ones like we see in these files. We want to see all the people in these files get in trouble, get put away behind bars, right? Once that happens, there's going to be a lot of crazy stuff happening, I'm guessing. You might want to get this book. Get the printed version, $37. Go check me out on X, Rumble, all the other ones. Also, check this out. So let's get back to the video. So we have here, New York Post reported that humans should expect fires, floods, upheaval, apocalyptic extremes during Saturn's recent transition to Aries. They're saying this literally when our president changed his mind. Our president changed his mind on the files very same day. Expect a lot of weird shit to happen now. Fires, floods, apocalyptic extremes. Expect it all. this is what I'm literally talking about. So they're and then of course this ties in with those weird coincidences. We have the lunar eclipse coming. We have these planets aligning and all that kind of stuff. Eder, you get the idea, right? So we got that as well. And then we got Norway, one of the first countries to actually arrest someone who was involved in these files. Now we're hearing that Germany might actually have the completely unredacted of these files. That might have just came out today as well. That might have also contributed to our president just saying, let's release it, because it's already getting released by other countries fully. So we might be seeing all of it soon here, and more people getting arrested. You have here a screenwriter for a really famous movie. What movie was it? I think it was Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction, yeah. Roger Avery, who co-wrote Pulp Fiction, lays out an extraordinary worldview on Joe Rogan, claiming that Luciferians, apparently, do rituals and all this stuff, hidden class manipulate reality. It's like basically what we've been saying for years. Avery alludes to Stephen Colbert doing a skit of him sacrificing, apparently, to these false gods. They make a joke about it, and the audience laughs. Okay, here we're all now conditioned to it. So they're trying to get you conditioned to it, right? That's the entire point of all these weird things being introduced into our society.
Speaking out in the Atlanta airport, he's like, I read the Epstein files. Like, all of you, you're going about your lives like nothing's happening. Look, you're all zombies. And he's right. It's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Everybody is just numb to everything. Like, dudes, we had a global pandemic, aliens, all these like revelations. People are, eating.
Yeah, jerky. Human, of course, jerky. I was talking about that, obviously. Then he goes on and plays this clip of this black guy in an airport losing his. I don't know. Maybe I can find that file. Black guy losing his stuff in an airport because everyone's just going about their lives like nothing happened while we learn all this crazy stuff about these people.
Diane, remember I was a full-on Trumper at the beginning? Then I liked him for the first few months as well. But the last 3 months, he's really made me question. Even though I know about the Temple and Baal and all that. But when they do good things, you can't help but notice it.
Let's see if I can find that. Maybe I can, maybe I can't. Where is that at? Oh, is it on Inside Edition? No, it's not on that. And I can't find it. Maybe I can play real quick here a little bit.
I'm going to watch that, Diane. I subbed to Megan Kelly.
Let's play this one sec here. Let me get to it. Okay, here we are. Here we go. Pause. All right, here we go. Let's play this. God, shorter than I thought, man. Let me back it up here. Let's play this. Here it is. Okay, so there's apparently a lot longer one of that. I don't have it. Basically, black dude freaking out, guy in a suit. Why are you all acting like nothing's happening? All this crazy stuff happening in our world. And yeah, man. Then you got this here. You got people, anti-ICE protesters supporting Don Lemon, waving. Let you guys guess what they are. Really. They're waving wiener like dildos, man. What the heck, bro? What does this have to do with ICE protests? What is this? What is this? Oh my goodness, these people are. Where is their minds? I don't understand these people. Oh, then you got. So what else do we got here? We have on top of this. Apparently, they had some sort of cancer remedy of some sort, not fully vetted, that has existed for quite a while. Apparently, at 10 years, just approved for lung cancer in Saudi Arabia. So apparently, this cure or cancer remedy has been approved in Saudi Arabia recently. However, the same drug is highly restricted in the United States. It can be used for certain types of cancer, but very, very limited. What has been being used for a lot more in other countries, apparently. Patrick Sheung went on air with Chris Cuomo dropped a claim that should have stopped the country cold. He says there's this cancer treatment, and we're still restricting it. It's being used in Saudi Arabia. Check this out.
Oh, well, why do you take this very seriously and believe it could have implications for us here at home?
Well, the why is really, I think there's now really significant proof, multiple trials, 10 years of work in which we've shown that this actually prolongs survival. Whether it's breast cancer, lung cancer, and even pancreas.
So what's really interesting is we recently pulled out of the WHO, and a lot of people are saying that there's all of a sudden out of nowhere, there's all these new remedies and things popping up everywhere from various countries. Not full cures, but like things that help you improve your life, live longer, stop it, sometimes heal it all the way. Just depends on which ones you're talking about, because there's apparently multiple in multiple countries. And it just all of a sudden out of nowhere, it's just like everywhere. People are talking about it. And some are wondering if it's like intentionally they didn't want these things to be, because they couldn't make any money off it. You can't make money off a cure. You can make money off prolonging things sometimes. Is that why? Some are wondering if that's the reason why. And there's even some sort of evidence towards that. You have here this last 4 years, we're talking a certain company that's well known here, Iser here, right? 45 billion to buy up 2 drug companies that are specializing in this treatment, as you can see there, cancer. These 2 companies right here. This model, forced drug on billions, cause massive spike apparently in this happening in your body, and then that makes you make more money off these companies they just bought. So it's like all about making money, not about healing you. You see what I mean? That's are we just money machines for them, or are they actually trying to help you?
Money
or are they just trying to
machine.
pretend like they help you? This is the question you have to ask yourself. Why is it these things? You could just say, "Oh, it's just they haven't had a chance to check these things yet," or is it they're intentionally doing this? The question you have to ask yourself, I don't know. Well, I do know, but I'll let you guys answer the question. You have here Mel Gibson explains to Joe Rogan, Jesus Christ is God, the beauty of God's mercy. This is kind of cool.
It's an interesting fact to note that the first canonized saint, you know who it was?
No.
The first ever confirmed canonization as a saint was Dismas. You know who Dismas was?
No.
He was the thief on the cross next to Jesus.
Oh.
And he says to him, "You're going to be okay. This day, you'll be with me."
That's interesting. I didn't know that. Oh, God, I hope that music is
What?
not copyrighted. If that music's copyrighted, then you missed.
How do you know that? Even I know. I've always known that. How wouldn't Tony know that?
the entire clip, because I'll probably end up having to cut it out, but hopefully not. At any rate, here's another interesting thing I saw. That before Christianity, the stuff that you see in these emails and files were actually pretty normal amongst the civilized elite of society, right back in the Greek and Roman times. They would actually do these things. Here's an uncomfortable truth about these Epstein accusations. We only find them morally reprehensible because of Christianity. Before the spread of Christianity, civilized Greek and Roman elites openly flaunted their under, of course, age stuff they were doing. You had Emperor Hadrian built an entire city in honor of his favorite boy. And so I've talked about Emperor Hadrian before, but in regards to giants, because he was the one who. So what happened was you had Ajax the Greater from the Trojan Wars, and he was from thousands and thousands of years ago. Emperor Hadrian was from around the time of Christ, like 138 AD. So what happened was the tomb of Ajax the Greater was going out to sea. Like the water had crept into the tomb and was like it was erasing it from the land. So they ended up taking the bones of Ajax the Greater and putting them into a new tomb. And they measured his height, and it was the same as it said in these Greek tales, like the Trojan War tales.
I was just about to say, wasn't he the Trojan Wars? I was just about to say that.
Iliad and stuff. It said that he was 12 cubits. which I think is like 18 to 20 feet tall or something. And he said, yeah, actually, he was 12 cubits. They actually remeasured him. And this is thousands of years later. In the time of Christ, they measured him and found him to be the same length as it said in the text, in the Iliad. Right? At any rate, that's my video. I kind of want to see what you guys think, Lynn.
I haven't read the Iliad. I think I should. Guys, I'm going to hang up now.
You know, the concept well, and thanks for watching.
For a delicious dinner that.
Okay, guys. God bless. See you tomorrow.
Disappears. Pick up Latina Fresh. We got the weeknight.
Stefan sells tailored suits. Stephen sells whatever suits. But when it comes to the best software supporting Aussie businesses, we all agree on MYOB.